Good evening. My name is Ryan Kelly, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Inland Wetland Commission meeting for the town of Monroe. It is
35.
6:35.
what is the date?
Oh, the 23rd.
April 23rd, 2025, and the time is 6:35. Will everyone please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will take a roll call of the members of the commission and staff present during tonight's hybrid meeting. Please answer here or present, starting with myself. Ryan Kelly, Vice Chairman, acting as Chairman tonight. Here. Rick Smith.
Here.
Jim Stewart, Professional Engineer. Here. Benjamin Sabia, Secretary.
Here.
Paul Fernandez is not here. Mark Zamery.
Here.
Eric Lindstrom, Commissioner, is also not here, just to clarify. Kathleen Gallagher, Planning and Zoning Administrator.
Here.
And Andrew Brotman, Inland Wetlands Enforcement Officer.
Here.
Okay, before we start, I'll read our mission statement and how the meeting will proceed. The Inland Wetlands Mission Statement. The objective and purpose of the Inland Wetland Commission is to provide for overall protection and preservation of the inland wetlands and watercourses within the town of Monroe. Meeting procedure. Please note that this meeting is being conducted utilizing electronic equipment in compliance with State Law Public Act 21-1. As such, this meeting will be recorded and will be available to the public in compliance with state law. If you're attending remotely, you will automatically be muted and unable to unmute yourself. If you wish to speak during the public participation portion of the meeting, please use the raise hand function. If you're participating via telephone, press *9 to activate the raise hand feature. Staff will announce your name and unmute you when it is your turn to speak. The video feature has also been disabled for public participation. Anyone participating remotely should state their name and title, if applicable, at the outset of each occasion that such person is speaking. All votes taken during which any member of this body are participating remotely shall be taken by roll call unless the vote is unanimous. The chat features will not be utilized nor considered during this meeting. In the normal course of our meetings, we will hear public hearings and other applications. The protocol for public hearings is to have an applicant make a presentation to the commission, during which and after which the commission will ask the applicant questions. I ask that applicants keep their presentations as concise as possible. The commission will then review town, staff, and other independent comments. The meeting will then be open for the public comment. I will ask that all comments be made to the chair or commission. After any and all comments pro and opposition or of a general nature are made, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. Please keep comments or questions direct, or a time limit of 3 minutes may be imposed. It is not necessary that the applicant respond, but generally in their best interest to do so. There will be no further opportunity for new questions unless new material is entered in as evidence or testimony during their response. Please keep all comments pro and con specific to inland wetlands related matters. Other applications that do not involve a public hearing will follow a similar format, with the exception that there will be no public comment allowed. The meeting follows our published agenda unless otherwise amended. Andrew, are there any changes to the agenda?
There's 2 items to add to the agenda. One is an amendment modification application, IWC 2021-09, file number 1382. It's 1271 Monroe Turnpike.
Okay, where
That would be added to application acceptance.
application acceptance, okay. And say again for me just one more time, IWC.
IWC 2021-09, file number 1382, 1271 Monroe Turnpike.
2021?
Yes. It's an amendment modification.
Oh, okay.
Second item is IAA-25-11, file number 1535, 80 Christiana Drive, and that'll be added to agent activities.
What was the street number again?
80 Christiana Drive.
Okay, and is it logical to put those at the bottom of each of those sections?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need a motion?
You need a motion?
Do I have a motion to add IWC 2021-09, file 1382 to the regulated activities and IAA-25-11, file 1535 to the agent approvals section?
Agent activities.
Agent activities section of the agenda?
Motion.
Motion
Motion.
from
Motion.
Commissioner Sabia,
Motion to add IWC 2021, file number 1382, and IAA 25-11, number 1535, the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Sabia, a second from Commissioner Stewart. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Vote is unanimous. Okay. All right, thank you, Andrew. So we've done the roll call. General public participation. This is a period of time reserved for public participation. Anyone in the gallery or online for matters not specific to anything that is in front of us tonight or soon to be in front of us. Is there anyone that has any comments unrelated to today's agenda? No one in the chambers? Anybody online?
Nobody online.
No one online. Okay. All right. So then let's move into regulated activities. Application acceptance, regular hearing, and hearing determination. The first on the list is IWC-2025-05, file 1534, 169 Enterprise Drive, which is a construction of parking area and septic system with associated grading commercial buildings. 169 Enterprise Associates LLC applicant, Alan Shepard, NOK and Associates representative. And this is to determine
Whether it's a
public regular
or a regular hearing.
applicant.
The application, just one second. The application that's in front of you is a previously approved project from January of 2021 that never got filed within the statutory timeframe, making the previous approval null and void. With the new application, there were 3 modifications, which included moving a septic reserve system into a Newtown portion of the property. It crosses town lines, so they've moved it out of the Monroe area, moved it into the piece of property that is Newtown. And Newtown had already approved this. They redesigned the parking lot a little bit, which increased the parking lot by, I don't know how many square feet, but we're going to find out. And they downsized the buildings. In 2021, this was heard as a public hearing. It had no opposition back in 2021. If you decide to hold a public hearing, it would be staff's recommendation to open the public hearing on May 28th due to the fact that if tonight's public hearings get continued, then that would potentially be 4 public hearings and a regular hearing on 88 Main Street for May 14th. So statutorily, we have the time to do either date, and public notice can go out, and we still have the time to do that. Applicant is here tonight if you have any questions.
Sure. Would you like to come up? You could introduce yourself, name and title, and share with us what you'd like to about the application.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Joe Thibodeau on behalf of 169 Enterprise Associates. Alan Shepard is unable to attend tonight. He has a prior commitment with another town meeting. But pretty much as Andrew introduced the project, it is a reapplication of the same project, with some minor revisions to it, due to the fact that in 2021, the project was never carried out, as Andrew stated. We did move the reserve area from the Newtown portion or from the Monroe portion of the property into Newtown. The area there is much better for the septic reserves, and it also is further away from the wetlands and provides us more usable area in the Monroe section of the property. The main revision, as Andrew had discussed, was approximately 2,000 square feet of addition to the parking area with the reduction in size of buildings. Any questions?
Open it up to the commission. Commissioner Smith, do you have any questions?
On the septic tanks, septic field is pretty close to the wetland line. Did you consider any other alternative locations for that septic field?
The problem is there's no other feasible locations that are close to the site. They're talking to the main area of the septic, right?
I'm looking at the 56 linear foot times 2.
In the Monroe portion of the property.
Yeah, it is.
So that septic location is actually, this project was previously approved in the early 2000s with the prior owner. When we purchased the piece of property, we had taken all of their plans that they had previously had approved and adapted those to our use. So in terms of the elevations, we adjusted things a little bit. The location of the septic system, parking areas and whatnot was kind of adapted from the plan previously approved in the early 2000s, which was then once again carried over to our application in 2021. And again now.
You know how many feet it is away from the wetlands?
I do not have the actual. That would be a question, better fit for Alan. Tonight.
Keep in mind, this is just to determine.
Yeah. Okay. No, that was a concern that I had, no other.
I guess probably related to that, just remind me again, why this did not progress in 2021?
Just due to numerous factors, one of them being the uncertainty and what was to come like for our business at the time. We had kind of had a streamlined plan, and then amidst everything that happened in the world, we were unsure what our workload would be, what building costs would be, what the future would bring. So we were kind of uncertain at the time. But we had sort of temporary pause in the project, and now we kind of regrouped, and that's why we slightly adjusted the size of the buildings, kind of redetermined our usage, and came up with a plan that's a little bit more financially feasible and a little bit easier to carry out than what we originally came in with, and we're much more comfortable with the new plan.
Thank you.
Commissioner Stewart, any questions?
So it was a big topic. You're gonna have alternates, feasible and prudent alternatives submitted.
We don't have any alternatives at this time.
Suggest you come up with some.
Okay. We didn't come up with any because we had kind of gone on the basis that last time that this plan was approved and worked, so we're gonna carry forward the same plan.
I think just to give some direction, right? Do we want to just cover what the guidance is on that? I think 2 alternatives, right?
I mean, especially if someone's gonna send it to a public hearing. I don't have anything.
Commissioner Sabia?
When this was presented last time, I'm sorry, I think I heard somebody say that there was no public interest in the last time it was presented.
There was no, right, that is correct.
And I'd like to add also, following our wetland, the last time we did go to the Planning and Zoning Commission as well and receive a special exception permit. Once again, was not executed, hence why we're here.
I mean, other than that clarification, I don't have any other questions.
Did, when you went to Newtown for the reserve, did you show them how you were going to cross the wetlands?
Yes, they said that they had no problem.
Okay. But it was definitely going to be in Newtown, you're going to be crossing.
Yes,
Okay.
I do not think that I have any specific questions at this time that haven't been asked already. Anyone else? Any additional follow-up?
I'm gonna make one note, which is that I, as the planning and zoning administrator, have not seen this. I was not here during the first approval. And this just hasn't come in front of planning and zoning yet. Let's just have a quick conversation. We do have some setback requirements for subsurface utilities, and we just want to make sure that you guys are in
Okay.
compliance.
Yeah, no, make sure we adhere to those. Further questions?
I do not have any. Would anyone like to make a motion as to whether this is made a public hearing or a regular hearing?
Sorry, real quick, did Newtown have a public hearing or not?
There's no public hearings for Newtown, no.
No.
I would move that we go to a regular meeting
A motion for this to,
on the date suggested,
That'd be May 28th.
May 28th.
If you wanted to make it, I mean, there's no constraint if you wanted to put it on the next one, which would be May 14th. That's all up to you.
a motion for this to be made a regular meeting, regular hearing. Do I have a second? Second from Commissioner Sabia. All in favor? Aye. Vote is unanimous.
Thank you very much. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you.
We determine right now when that will take place. I mean, should we make it the 28th? Is there?
The 28th, actually, it should have been mentioned in the motion.
It's the 28th.
Yes, we'll move that to opening on May 28th. Are there any other, no, provide two alternatives. That was the only, okay.
And you'll do a full review.
Yeah.
Yeah, we decided.
Okay.
Well, I would like one of the alternatives to address the septic tanks. Just because they said it was, there was nothing feasible before, doesn't mean that new eyes can't figure it out. It is farther away.
Okay, I'll provide that in my preliminary review.
The other thing they could look at would be a retaining wall rather than the fill.
Retaining wall as opposed to fill.
In the upland review area. And not that it would make sense or be financially work, but it's an alternative.
Okay. So moving on, I'm just looking for the paperwork for this one.
It's probably a new packet.
It's a smaller packet, yes.
It's this one here, right?
Yep, right here. Here.
Oh, yeah.
I got it. Okay. Okay. This is,
Explain this one.
I got it.
okay, so moving on,
I'll make sure the history.
the next application acceptance and regular hearing determination is IWC 2021-09, file 1382, 1271 Monroe Turnpike. I don't think I have the specific otherwise.
This is a modification amendment to move units, well, 4 units, number 20, 21, 22, and 25, to be moved 5 feet closer to wetlands than what was previously approved. It all stays within the limits of disturbance. With this proposed modification, unit 25 is still 70 feet off of flagged wetlands. And what you should know is that this was previously approved in 2021. This was the Ridge subdivision, 1271 Monroe Turnpike. The previous approval was in 2021. There was a public hearing due to both significant impact and public interest. And this modification that is in front of you is to move 5 of the units a little closer to wetlands.
Not the unit. So just for quick clarification, the units that are along the wetlands, the 20s that were just mentioned, this commission approved them for a specific location and a specific size of the accessory patio or deck in the rear. They were 12 by 16. The developer would like to expand some of those patios a little larger than what they are. From a stormwater perspective, we don't have any issue with it, as their calculations just have to even out at the end. But because it's up against wetlands, they're actually asking for additional encroachment into the upland review area. So we had asked them to put an amendment in for that. I believe there's only 1 or 2 units where the actual unit is moving closer, and I believe it's 2 feet at the most. The majority of the ask is that the actual patio or deck area would be expanded further towards the wetlands. And the applicant's engineer is actually here tonight on another project if there are.
Someone from the application like to come up and.
My firm did the plans. My client was really the one that was talking to the staff, so I know what's being done. I wasn't involved in the conversation, but yeah, I think like one unit is kind of perpendicular, runs parallel to the wetlands, and it's really moving laterally about 2 feet. And then we had shown either showed smaller patios or didn't label them or didn't, you know, and they're just asking to have them be bigger. Yeah,
How far is this being constructed now?
Yes.
So is that house just put in the wrong place?
No, all in the right place, actually.
No, when they come in, when they get individual buyers for each one, they come to us with the final model that was purchased sometimes. And what they're telling us is sometimes the owner will ask for another 2 feet on the building because they want to do X, Y, and Z. That happens once in a very blue moon because.
No, I'm all over the 2 feet, but it looks like this building 25 has this, looks like they're just shifting it back 2 feet. It's not growing in size.
Yeah, it's all.
Correct. So that one's, yes, that one might just be shifting.
Bigger house, and then they started the process, getting them that buyer since.
Why would it doesn't
So
really
they're
matter.
going in and
We
continue
could,
to show it's sliding back, so it doesn't impact the stormwater. We have enough capacity. We've done an analysis and we can keep track of that throughout. So it's really just the patios are probably more of an impact, but there's limited disturbance remains as approved. There's no modifications beyond the change in patio sizes.
and the patios are brick, concrete.
They're going to be definitely fixed.
We've been stamped concrete up to this point.
So we did in all of our, we counted all of the units were classified as patios during the initial previous design. So we had that all as impervious to begin with. So it's just keeping track at the end of how much we have versus what the initial was. They've reduced some pavement on their drains.
Okay, I move that we go to a regular hearing.
Well, before we do that, does anyone else have any? We'll just run down.
A question. You refresh our memories. When this was initially approved numerous years ago, you were at 16 houses or 19 houses, and then we came and put number of.
At 19, no, it started at 27, but it was attached units. We had a mixture of attached, we had 6-unit buildings, and then we had in the rear, there was singles. And I think we got up to 27 homes on that. Could be off by a couple numbers there. Then we came back in with single family, and there was 19 at that time, I believe. And then the property changed hands, and they got some zoning changes, and then they increased it to 25.
25.
25.
So 19 to 25, there were 6 additional homes that were put on the western side, I understand.
Yeah, the building space got smaller, which allowed them to fit more homes.
And that was just, I just want to make sure I knew exactly what it was.
So just for clarity, so unit 25 was moved back 2 feet from the road, which means that the northeast corner was moved closer to the wetland, right?
Slightly, I think, yeah.
A couple feet. or-
Couple feet.
And unit 21 is, I think, moving 2 feet closer to the wetlands. And as, Mr. Edwards had said, I agree with him that the biggest impact is actually that the patios are expanding.
Yeah.
And that was really what kind of generated staff's concern that we felt like the modifications they were asking were too far out of the realm of a field change that we were comfortable doing only because of the impact to the wetlands.
So the designation of the blue line is probably the wetlands and the red line is the upland review area.
Wetlands is it's the limit of disturbance. And the limit of disturbance isn't changing, but when we talk about the patio and the deck, that's a impervious surface in the structure. So, and because they were doing a large row of them, this wasn't just one individual one, we asked them to capture all of them and come in for an amendment.
Thank you. No further questions.
What is WSB 100?
That's the 100-foot setback.
Okay.
Commissioner Sabia, any questions?
I don't have any questions on this one.
Okay, well, I heard a motion.
Motion that we go to a regular meeting
A motion.
on the date of
May 28th.
May 28th.
Yeah, we have a motion to make this a regular hearing from Commissioner Stewart, second from Commissioner Zamery. All in favor? Aye. Vote is unanimous. Okay, moving on. Public hearings. All right, so first up in public hearings, we have IWC 2025-03, file number 1526, 2 Victoria Drive, proposed construction of 10,000 square foot daycare and associated site improvements. Central LLC applicant, J. Edwards and Associates LLC representative.
Submit a notice of public hearing here. In accordance with CGS Section 8-7D, a public hearing will be held on Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025 at 6:30 PM or soon thereafter via hybrid Zoom. And an in-person attendee is located at Monroe Town Hall, Council Chambers, 7 Faneuil Road, Monroe, Connecticut, 06468, concerning the following. IWC 2025-03, file number 1526, 2 Victoria Drive, proposed 10,000 square foot daycare and associated site improvements, Central LLC applicant, J. Edwards and Associates LLC representative. These were published in the Connecticut Post on April 9th, 2025 and April 16th.
Read the exhibits into record.
Yes, please.
I'll read the exhibits into record. We have exhibit number 1 received on 3/18 is application and plan set prepared by Jason Edwards. Exhibit number 2 received 3/20/25 preliminary review by myself, Andrew Brotman. Exhibit number 3 received 4/1/25 was the engineer comments prepared by James DeMeo. Exhibit number 4 received on 4/8/25 site record review prepared by Kathleen Gallagher. Exhibit number 5 received 4/17/25 response to the engineer's comments prepared by Jason Edwards. Exhibit number 6 received 4/17/25 planting plan and wetland watercourse impact statement prepared by William Kenny. Exhibit number 7 received on 4/23/25 is a legal memo prepared by attorney Brian McCann. Exhibit number, and that was it. So
Just for clarification, that last exhibit came in this afternoon, so this commission has had a chance to read it yet, but the applicant's attorney is here tonight as well. And before we continue, any other items from the commissioners? Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Brian McCann. I'm an attorney for Zabel Schellenberg. I represent the applicant, Central LLC. Ms. Gobb said I prepared a memo and submitted it today. Do you folks have a copy? Because I brought copies.
They don't have a copy of it.
You could share one, that would be perfect.
I have copies. Just in order of presentation, I'm going to have my experts present first. And then I'm going to go over that memorandum with you sort of in conclusion in a little bit. So you don't have to read through it real quickly. I think I'd like to sort of walk you through it. So Central LLC is proposing a 10,000 square foot daycare facility, outdoor play area and associated improvements for 2 Victoria Drive. On the application team is Jason Edwards, J. Edwards and Associates, professional engineers and land surveyors, as well as William Kenny Associates. For the presentation, I'm just going to have Jason come up and just show you some of the site history, which I'm later going to touch on in my memo, and show you the building plans. Then you'll hear the wetlands impact analysis from Bill Kenny, and then I'll walk you through the memo. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
Let me walk back there.
I think that Jason Edwards, J. Edwards Associates, engineer surveyor for 227 Stepney Road, Houston. He's representing Central LLC. Brian stated this is an application for a new daycare building, parking, playground on Victoria Drive. Victoria Drive is located is so this is Victoria Drive, located with Swiss Army headquarters. Is the new Amazon facilities in the rear. There's the Olay soccer company, and then there's the vacant land on the left side of Victoria Drive, on the west side, that butts up against some commercial properties on the rear of that business. There's some state open space in the back, and some Main Street comes across here. This area here is 1036 Main. That was, I believe, approved for some future retail use as well. So Blue Flag is the location that we're proposing to take in. This site has a long history, different uses and different landscape since you know, 80s, actually, as far back as I went. I don't know how long this was here, but this was a summer camp, I guess, for many years. They had there's a baseball field here. You can see some little cottages were scattered over in this area. And there was another building in this neighborhood. So this was sort of the late 80s and before any development really happened there. Again, this comes to 1990, with a little bit better photo. Still see the same, whatever this building is. And there's a concrete slab there, though when I but that's gone now. I think we figured out it was a Quonset hut. The Quonset hut, some sort of storage building there they used. And this was a field. So, and they had this dirt road through here. Again, little cottages you can see scattered in there. And at this point, this was Mache. I don't know what they did there, but that was the industrial building there. And this is down with the Amazon, repurposed Amazon building on the Trumbull line at Spring Hill. It's kind of a case of a picture. In 1995, it's not much has changed. So in 2001 is where things started to change. This is the approved master plan, site plan for development called Canterbury Square that was approved in, plans were dated in 2001, the approval was around then. At that time, they had proposed a series of medical office buildings in the back. I think there was also possibly retail back there, as well as a retail in the front. And then this was actually designated as a gas station, right, or not a gas station, I'm sorry, as a daycare, right in the same area, right where we're proposing it now. That's starting in the wrong spot. It shouldn't be here. But that's the same entrance, same location, the same river as it's shown there. It's still where it is today. And this is what approval that approved the construction of Victoria Drive. So at this point, they were permitted to start work on the site. And this is just an enlargement of that same plan. This is the landscape plan and wetlands mitigation plan that was provided in that application. This is a daycare building. I think it's a daycare. It's a slightly smaller building, but same location. It's actually closer to the river than we are now with our proposal. They had a playground area and a smaller parking lot, same exact entrance location. And then there was the retail space in front proposed. So this was in 2004, continuation of that approval. The applicant at that time came in with a daycare building. This is very close to the same size as what we had, maybe slightly smaller, but the parking area on this was larger. And the overall area, I have a slide further in that shows the comparison of these two. But it had a larger disturbance area than what we're proposing now. And I think a significant part of this plan was that this bike trail, this is the bike trail that rails to trails, or rails to trail, that follows along the river right here. That was approved as part of this application for the daycare. They relocated this. Originally, it was to go right through the wetlands. That was where the easement went. So the developer at the time relocated this to connect out to the other side of the rail trail. And that was then subsequently constructed. The rest of the building was not, but the entrance was. The entrance in the same location. So this is in 2004, right after that approval. You can see that they had begun work on the site. Part of the, I don't know if there was a specific mining permit for this site or if it was just part of the site plan approval, but they were excavating and shipping gravel out of the back, gravel mine essentially for a few years. So they took the gravel out of here to bring the grade to what the buildings needed to be at. These were a couple decent sized hills back here. They had to level out in order to get the area that could accommodate the type of development they proposed. Again, it's still the same area here. It was used, appears to be used as a staging area. And speaking with the contractor who did the work, he indicated that that was the case. They used this for staging. You can see they have silt fence around here. They cleaned it up and they kept the vehicles up on that concrete pad. That entrance that we're showing on our current plans is in the same location, coming out to the same spot. During this construction, they also built a new culvert here. There was an old, there was 3, I believe, 24-inch pipes that went across there. And that's been expanded to, I think, 4 box culverts that are about 6 foot by 4 foot or 8 by 6. So it's a huge crossing. It's much improved to what was there. This is a little closer view of that. You can see the silt fence here, and the vehicles and the entrance coming in and out. So this was an active site. It was protected in the sense that there was, precautions for soil erosion controls in place, but it was designated as an active part of the site. These are actual photos that I found in my records from 2004. This is the operation in the rear. That's that box culvert I just talked about being installed there. This is where, approximately where the front end of the daycare is today relative to where it was then. And this is looking the other direction, so our site will be over here. And they're installing utilities. So this was early stage construction. So in fast forwarding, 2006 was the beginning of the Swiss Army approvals. You can see back here, they came in this large building. It's kind of a tough plan to see, but you can see all the topographic lines that are underneath that all had to go away to make room for that building. So that's what they were working towards. This plan, there was nothing proposed on this area of the property during this, but again, this is all one piece of property. all the approvals at that time were attached to this large piece. This is in 2006, just to show what it looked like at that point. This is, you can see the beginnings of the construction, the footings for the building, and then this still the staging area, and there was also, I think, a nursery of some sort that I put in on the site. Closer picture. This was actually in 2007 that I found in the file store that just showed that same, and actually had a retail store on this corner, or is that the other side? No, that's the same one. So I had a retail store, but still showed a 10,000 square foot building and actually a larger parking area, much larger parking area. I don't know that this was anything more than conceptual. So the town was parking areas. The below of that shows 10,000 square foot building, large parking lot, same entrance and crossing that we proposing now, and that already exists. 2008, you can see the Swiss Army building is complete or near completion, and the rail trail, you can see that beginning to take form along the edge here. That's under construction. You can see the driveway and the active work on that site. That's actually 2010, and that is the completed rail trail. Sorry about that. That's the completed rail trail, which is where it is now. And it provides an excellent buffer to the river and the wetland on that side of the property. That's a well-defined trail, and that's, I think, a great quality of the site now is you have a buffer on that side that protects from any encroachment into that wetland beyond the trail. Now this is more current. It's 2014. Site doesn't look a lot different, but the rail trail is visible. You can see that there was just left to its natural state at that point. It was still the concrete pad was still in place, I believe, at this point. And this was prior to the Amazon development still. I think this site had been inactive and looked like they maybe were demoing this site, the Richmond site down the road. This was a mitigation plan that was prepared and approved in 2014. This was to remove this concrete slab that we discussed earlier as part of the day camp, or summer camp, I should say. They came in for permits for that, and there was remediation plantings that were proposed and completed along this southwestern side of the development. This was all completed, and to my knowledge, was all signed off on. I think Bill can speak to that a little more as to what these plantings have turned into now. That's just an enlargement of that same plan. This was the area of the concrete pad that had been removed. Some different plantings that were proposed in 2016. Again, this is, I think, the mitigation data away on that photo. You can see they're maybe working on that. And there's a pond. That's where the slab was. So that's where they excavated out the concrete, and that you had to take water in that area. So that's where that came from. At that point, they subdivided the property as well. I think to separate off the Amazon parcel, well, now Amazon parcel, and Swiss Army, and then this became its own piece in front. It was around this time. 2018, that's again just see that's they're under construction or just inactive. The site is inactive, and they began work out in front at that point. 2019, again, not much different. 2020. Okay, now in 2020, this was just the sheet I could find on the Amazon. Nothing by my house. So they came in and proposed the Amazon facility that's there now, the parking lot. Our site is up here, this general area. So this is the large multi-acres of parking spaces they've got back there. You can see that here. That's the construction that was completed on the other side of the river from our proposal. Pretty large, as everyone knows, it's a large parking lot essentially. They do have a gigantic stormwater system underneath this parking lot, as well as basins here. That's 2022, where they were more or less done. It was active at that point, and the site still remains as it is. And then I just came forward to the current day photos. So again, the site really hasn't changed since the work that was done to remediate it in 2014, I guess, around 2017. The site around it has been transformed though by the Amazon, Swiss Army, and the other developments that are approved and hopefully be constructed soon. So this is just a summary of the history. We had the active summer camp, Canterbury Square approval, which included the daycare building where we're proposing a daycare building today. It's just important that we want to make it clear that that was the approved use of that area of the property was the daycare building. So we're kind of finishing that permit. We feel that that was approved, the trail was approved, and really we're not going back to try to finish off what was the original intent of the master plan for the site. 2004, as I said, there was the site plan for the daycare. Construction of Victoria Drive in 2004, 2006 Swiss Army, 2008 the rail trail, 2014 wetland mitigation approvals, 2017 work was completed on mitigation, and then the Amazon 2020 and 2021. So now just to go through quickly what we are proposing. This site is it's 11 acres total site area. About 5.5 of that is wetlands. There is this access driveway that comes through here that divides the two areas of the property. We're proposing the daycare down where I've got my cursor here. There's another hopefully upcoming plans for this area of the site soon, but the focus of our proposal is this area back here. The entire site does slope down in towards the river, and this area is within the floodplain, which means that we have to construct the building in accordance with FEMA standards and town standards to accommodate the flood zones. So this is just an enlargement of that same photo. This photo is from this year, from last year, late last year. So you can just see that the bike trail or the trail is well established. There's vegetative buffer there, and then there's the wetland pocket that was not there until after the mitigation was completed and approved. So I think that helped really enhance that wetland. And we're trying to keep our development in this area. This is a large scale view. The red is the proposed daycare building. You see the gray parking lot here. And then the gray shaded area is the wetlands. In the back, that's remaining untouched. There is no direct wetlands impact proposed, no disturbance. So we've got again 10,000 square foot building, about 17,000 square foot parking lot, 5,000 square foot playground to the back side of the building. There's no direct wetland disturbance. Now, I think an important point to note is that this is all fenced in as part of, this is a national chain daycare facility, so they require that this all be secure and enclosed. So you won't have anyone exiting out the site into the wetlands. It provides a very good permanent buffer to the wetland environment. Before here, so this is just to try to illustrate the level of capacity that we have to provide here for flood storage as well as stormwater. Now typically the stormwater treatment would be the light level. That's the amount of area that we had to store for stormwater detention requirements and treatment requirements. For state of Connecticut, that's been submitted to the town engineer. He returned with comments. We responded to them, but I don't think he's finished the review yet, but we're generally on the same page with the design, figuring out detail. The darker blue is what is called the compensatory storage for placing fills in the floodplain. Because this building has to be elevated, the base flood elevation, which is the regulatory elevation for floodplain, meaning that you have to be above that. That's where it's going to flood to. We have to be a foot above that at least. So we're proposing a building elevation of 305 with a base flood of 304. Now, because of the use and the national chain requirements, we have to make this essentially level to get in and out of the building. So everything has to be elevated along with that. Now, we're talking about a maximum fill, I think about 2 feet. So it's not a massive amount of fill we're putting in, but over the entire area, it equates to a significant amount of storage we have to provide. So We've created a compensatory storage pond here that will fill in events, heavy rain events. And then we've also got a series of chambers underneath the parking lot that will be fed from that through here. Those are independent of the stormwater treatment. The stormwater does overflow through this system, but this is totally separate, so the water is all runoff from surrounding grounds, not from the parking lot, because of that. In a flood event, it's going to be more, but on a regular storm event, that's not going to be taking untreated water and passing it through. And the town engineer is in the process of finalizing his review on this. We've gone through one round of comments, but it's somewhat of a complicated system here, so it's, I'm not sure that he's 100% finished with his review. Soil erosion and sediment controls, those are prepared in accordance with DEP guidelines. Just to illustrate the amount of silt fence, this is the yellow is the silt fence, so they don't we're going to be wrapping that. The septic system is actually being relocated. The original approval had the septic in this area, and we determined that the soils really weren't adequate, in our opinion, for a septic down there. So they're very good soils up here. So we are pumping it along the shoulder to the septic up here above. We have also got, as part of the soil erosion control plan, there's a flood storage pond that will be used during construction as a sediment trap basin, so everything gets diverted to that. That prevents from anything getting to the river. And then there's these are swales that are the direct flow back into the pond. There's alternatives. This was another concept we had looked at primarily in the early part of the project, and note that the building is the same building when it's turned 90 degrees, and then the playground is in the rear. This was one, it was not the preference of the daycare company. They preferred it to be working the other way. And then also this had more regulated activity, not significantly more, but it created more of a disturbance in upland areas. So we decided to go with the one option that we have. And then as a second alternative, I included the approved plan from 2004. That's a pretty substantial or quality alternative since it was approved. But I do feel that our current plan is better. We're relocating the septic system out of this wetland area and review area, and we have an overall smaller area of disturbance than what's shown here. I tried to illustrate that. It's sort of hard to look at, but the blue is the 2004 approval. And you can see that the limited disturbance for that exceeds, goes way out into what's now the wetland. And that may have been some mitigation that was done as part of that, but the disturbance line for our current proposal is this kind of light purple, which is hard to see, but it follows much closer to the development than what was there, what was approved previously.
Can I ask, Mr. Edwards, just for my own clarification? So I see where the plantings were in what is now wetlands. Is that a result of the removal of the concrete slab and what has accumulated there since then?
I think I'm going to let Bill answer that one. I don't know if you want to answer it now, Bill. Or...
I mean, if you're going to get to it later, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure. I kept looking at that and wondering.
Yeah,
and
I don't want to answer it incorrectly.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm almost finished. This is I am finished. That's my last one. So I'm happy to answer questions. Or I'll on the screen.
Oh. Good evening. Bill Kenny, I'm the principal of William Kenny Associates in Fairfield. I'm a professional wetland scientist. It's in wetland science. I've been practicing for over 30 years, doing exactly this with landowners and
If you could just speak into the microphone.
Sure.
Sure.
wetland valuations and wetland restoration, habitat enhancement type work. So we were retained to help with this project as a way. One was to go out the wetlands, which we did in 2024. Then we got involved in the last few months with the development plan, working with the development team, both Jason and the owners and the applicants to come up with this plan that you have before you today, which I'm going to go through a number of reasons, but I do think that this is a much better plan than that in 2004. And it is my professional opinion that this can be completed without adversely affecting the wetlands and water courses on the property. And we're actually with the compensatory storage basin that Jason described. We're going to be expanding the wetlands on the property with that basin by over 6,000 square feet roughly. So, but I'm going to roughly go through the existing conditions with you and then proposed conditions and potential impacts and mitigation. So there's the major wetland system on the site is to the east of the proposed development area. That's the river. It flows north to south in the eastern portion of the property. There's a large forested floodplain wetland associated with that. And then in the immediately west of the proposed development is this pocket of wetland that is sort of a piece of wetland that's been broken up and reshaped over time, over many years. It's been worked around and worked on. And I believe the removal of that concrete slab for that previous building it certainly resulted in the expansion of the north end of it. It doesn't appear that the entire footprint of that slab was created wetland. I think just the southern end of that, which my understanding is right in this area. The wetland is expanded to the right. So that wetland is here, and then there's another wetland system off to the left here, off to the west. And this system has a small stream, unnamed stream that comes down, goes into a culvert underneath this driveway, discharges into this little pocket, which is gently sloping. There's a little bit of areas that are depressional where it holds water, which is pretty much where they removed the slab. They created a depressional system, which tends to have higher quality, higher functions when you have that depressional system versus a sloping system. So this system is fed primarily with this surface water from that stream, a little bit of groundwater, and then that comes down and goes into a pipe here and goes under the existing driveway. This pipe exists and is discharged into the floodplain of the Quantic River and the river itself. This wetland is a combination of shrubland and woodland. It's because of all the past disturbance, it's not a mature forest like the forest that's associated with the Quantic River. And so it has primarily more younger trees and a shrub layer that's primarily invasive vegetation. There's some meadow areas adjacent to it. And the tree layer is mostly native trees. There's some invasive trees. There's some Norway maple out there. But it's a relatively young vegetative community that's growing to mature over time. And then the wetland to the west is upstream of us. And the only activity that's being proposed in this area is the septic system, which on a gradient is at the same, it's pitching away from that wetland. That wetland's really out of the area of influence from our project. The project doesn't have a potential to influence that because it's upstream. So the potential for influence is this isolated system here, and to a smaller degree that river in the floodplain right now. But the presence of the Quantic River Trail that sits between the development and the river is a significant feature to help provide protection. In addition to mitigation, a variety of mitigation measures that are proposed with the development which I would get into now. The major thing I want to point out is the amount of restoration we're proposing. There is the building, the parking, of course, and a small playground, but otherwise, we're proposing to replant everything with native ground cover, shrubs, and trees. The only place we're currently proposing lawn is just along the road, along the sidewalk, to create a clean edge in the right of way for people using the sidewalk. But otherwise, it's going to be a natural environment around building and the park. Start at the top. We're proposing to help this young forest in the buffer here to move along and restore a shaded, forested community. So we have a fair amount of trees being proposed here. And I could just give you a quick summary, but we're overall probably proposing 85 native trees, 73 shrubs, over 800 native ground cover plants that are going to be rooted plants and coming from grown in containers. Compared to the 2004, so we had 85 trees. In 2004, they showed 7 trees, and they showed 30 shrubs versus the 73 shrubs we had. And they didn't have the rooted ground covers where we had 800, they had 0. But
Into the wet metal mix too, right?
yes, and then we have, in addition to the rooted plants that I mentioned, we have, we're using meadow or seed banks to establish, for example, we're going to establish an emergent wetland in this basin that is a compensatory storage basin. It's mislabeled on our drawing, but it's important to understand that it's different than the typical detention basins that you see on most developments, where when you see typically a detention basin, it's being used to clean water and hold back the project water from flooding someone downstream. Where all the water is being cleaned before it goes, if it makes its way to this. This is really for flood water that might come from the river when it rises up and floods. So this is compensating for the fill that's being brought in for the pad for the parking in the building. So because that's being raised up, we're lowering this area of the site. And in the process of doing that, creating about 6,000 square feet of more floodplain wetland that isn't there today. So then we're going to, that is one area. And then we have the restoration of the buffer to the north. Jason mentioned the fence that's around the development, and there's actually both a fence and a little retaining wall along the building in this area because of the fill. So rather than grading out and having more fill, they're proposing a retaining wall to keep that fill as tight as possible. It's only the width of the sidewalk off from the building. And that becomes a great demarcation structure and feature to keep people from wandering into the wetland or perhaps there's multi-landscape crews out here cutting grass or something like that. So this is all going to be a natural area once you get beyond that fence wall on that side of the building. And really, we use native plants for both habitat, but also ornamental value around the front of the building and around the parking lot, and just immediately adjacent to the playground. And also along the Quantic River Trail, we're putting native flowering trees along here for the people that are using the trail. I think that could be quite beautiful to have those native trees along there. As we move to the south area here, we're proposing there's invasive shrubs in this pocket of meadow. This is an existing pocket of meadow with some invasive shrubs, and so we're proposing to remove the invasive shrubs from here and recommending that area not be cut and be allowed to there are some tree saplings, allow those trees to continue to grow and create a woodland in this corner in addition to the woodland we're creating in this area. Over the septic system, we're proposing a native meadow where we've specified a seed mix of native plants. And then lastly, down in the southeast corner, between the road and the halfway here, we're proposing another native meadow. So we have these here, as you move further from the building, we have these more natural wild areas close to the building and parking lot. We're still using native plants, but it's a little bit more refined. That's where the rooted ground covers are being planted. Further away is where we're using seed mixes. So, and then let's talk a little bit about potential for impacts. The project is being a relatively level site, and it will be brought in a controlled manner and spread and compacted. So the fact that it's relatively level, overall it's relatively small. It's got a good free draining soil beneath it, the sand and gravel for the most part. The potential for erosion here is relatively minimal. Nonetheless, during construction, there will be a soil erosion sediment control plan, a typical plan that you're accustomed to seeing with all the perimeter controls and then measures, and the use of that compensatory storage basin will be used as a sediment trap during construction. So that's a significant feature to help trap any sediment that might be moving towards the river. So confident that during construction, the project can be constructed in a way that doesn't impact the wetlands that are adjacent to this. And then when you look at all of the collection and treatment system for stormwater that would come off of the building and parking lot in the future, that's a significant structure. And with it being designed in accordance with the most recent state manual and the town requirements for drainage, those requirements and the manual guidelines are all set up to ensure that when you have development projects like this, if you follow those guidelines, that the water that's leaving the site will be adequately treated to protect the streams and wetlands that are downstream from the site. So, and then the compensatory meadow actually provides some polishing, third but unnecessary level of treatment, because we're meeting all the state requirements with the structures that are below the parking lot. So when you consider that there's no loss of wetland, that we're actually expanding the wetland, and then the improvements to the buffers around the proposed development, and then the mitigated measures with the soil erosion and sediment control during construction, and stormwater best management practices that help to capture and treat and detain the water after construction. It's based on all of those factors that it's my opinion that the project can be completed in such a way that it will not adversely affect the wetlands or water sources. Please answer any questions.
Before I open it up to everybody, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the concrete slab, because we did go through a bit of a history lesson on the site. So I just want to make sure that I understand. Can you all clarify when that slab was removed? What was the date on the timeline?
Around, I couldn't tell you exactly, but I think the permit was given around 2013, 14, and the work was actually done closer to 2017, I think. I think the permit would be even more concrete, but, you know.
No, that helps. So then the application that was approved in 2021 for Canterbury Square, the wetlands were significantly different in terms of their shape and size at that time.
Yeah.
Do you know what that slab represented? I know that's hard to answer perhaps. Why was that there? What was its purpose?
It was part of the summer camp operation. There was a baseball field there. I think someone said it was a Quonset hut, which
I struck earlier photos. It looked like a building of some.
And was it blocking wetland? Like were wetlands right up against it? I mean, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, often
That was pre-regulations when that was all constructed.
Sure. Okay.
when you look at the topography, it looks like they may have cut into the hillside to expand that level area where the ball fields were. And then Also, when you do that, you hit groundwater and you create a seep. Wetlands form right at the base of that.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to start down on this side, just open it up for any questions from the commission. Commissioner Savy, if you want to start us off. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I do, actually.
I just go.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
Again, for the record, Brian McCann, Zabel & Culver. I just wanted to just briefly walk you through this memo that I had prepared because I realized that you didn't have it before the hearing, so I think it makes sense just to hit on some of the highlights. First of all, I just point out all the application materials. There are quite a few, and after hearing some read into the record tonight, I think it's even more expansive than I have outlined here. Jason spent some time on the subject history and the permit history. I have that detailed in the memo, just for your edification, quick reference on page 2. My next section is the analysis of the application material and just some quick relevant law. You folks have standards in your regulations for wetland permits in section 10.2. They basically mirror the Connecticut General Statutes. I took a look at those, except for misplaced apostrophes. The law says, case law says, the essential condition of review of an inland wetlands application is to determine whether the proposed activity will have an adverse impact on the water courses. Further evidence of general environmental impacts, mere speculation, general concerns don't qualify for substantial evidence of adverse impact. The Inland Wetlands Agency cannot assume that any alterations to the wetlands or the density of the development or land adjacent to the wetlands up on the review area will affect them. There must be a likely impact supported by substantial evidence in the record. What constitutes an adverse impact on a wetland is a technically complex issue that typically requires expert testimony. That's why we efforted to get some experts on the application team and put together a detailed impact analysis. I think the reason why the subject, I know that you had to sit through a lot with this, the permit, the site history and the permit history, but I think it's relevant essentially for two main aspects. One, the prior permits. Number two, just to establish that this is a very disturbed site. The soil has been historically disturbed for many decades, and I think you kind of tell that. And I could tell that during my site walk and sort of the struggle with some of the vegetation. It's not really, in my opinion, even really very good fill material. Bill Kenny, you heard his presentation. He started off his analysis by identifying all the inland wetlands, just to make sure that we have an accurate representation of where those wetland delineations are. Then he went and put together an impact assessment. You heard about that. And I pulled out from just a quick excerpt from his report that the combined effects of the proposed soil erosion, sedimentation control measures, stormwater BMPs, the robust habitat enhancement within the wetland buffer areas, the proposed commercial development will not adversely impact the wetlands or water courses. And another point is that while we're looking at some of the feasible and prudent alternatives, I think it's important not only just to take a look at the actual delineations of the building and the parking lot, but also to take a look at the entire application, which is why I spent time in my memo just highlighting the breadth of the application, because it includes all the mitigation measures, it includes the detention basin, it includes the wetland plantings, it includes the upland review area plantings, it includes the stormwater controls, because all these things can potentially lead to impact. So all these things were considered, as well as the prior iterations, were looked hard at in terms of if this was executed, would this be a better or worse scenario? William Kenny concludes that the stormwater system will provide a significant treatment, base flow control, floodwater control. Any water that's not infiltrated into the ground empties into the final segment of the treatment train, the flood storage basin, to avoid any stormwater being directly released into the adjacent wetlands or watercourse. And the other thing that he didn't touch on, but you could see in his report, which I really liked, was a before and after analysis of the wetland functions. It concludes that essentially they remain static, which is a good thing. So there's no decrease in any of the named wetland functions. I also pulled an excerpt out of Jason Edwards' report, the stormwater report. It said that the installation of the proposed stormwater management system, the original flow patterns will be maintained, and there will be no increase in peak runoff rates and volumes in the 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storm event. So I think the application team has demonstrated that the current proposal is the best alternative, and the experts have opined that there's no adverse impact on whole with the entire proposal. Next, I just wanted to talk to you quickly about feasible and prudent alternatives. The courts have said where there is no adverse impact on wetlands and watercourses determined by the Inland Wetland Agency, or its finding of an adverse impact is not supported by substantial evidence in the record, feasible and prudent alternatives to the proposed regulated activity do not have to be presented by the applicant or considered by the agency. I think the explanation there is obvious. If there's no impact, then you don't have to continue your search. Despite the applicant's expert having found here that there is no adverse impact, we still did go through the exercise of looking at the feasible and prudent alternatives. And as I stated on the bottom of page 5 in my memorandum, we have quite a few, more than 3 alternatives essentially. And the way that we get there is that, and I think this really makes common sense, we consider the prior iterations and the prior approvals, not just from the prior site plans, conceptual plans, but also the prior approval from this agency in 2004. I also cited a case just to support that concept, which says that prior submissions, prior applications, and count forwards, feasible consideration of feasible and prudent alternatives. That's at the top of page 6. It's the DeAngelis case. Lastly, the 2004 Inland Wetland Commission approval. First of all, we think that the current design is a better design, not just from an engineering stormwater standpoint, but also from a lack of impacts the wetland and water course. And the instant application also proposes, like I said, a much better mitigation plan, planting plan. This one is very robust, and the previous applications didn't have quite as much consideration towards that. The application is technically expired, but as you heard from Jason, part of the application was actually constructed, which is the rail to trail, the biking walking trail along the side of the property. The courts have said that there are very limited conditions in where a commission can reverse a prior ruling. That's at the bottom of page 6 of my memo. It's called the impotent to reverse rule. Impotent has a couple different meanings, in case you were wondering. Its general sense is powerless. Its general meaning is powerless. Should probably avoid Googling that to figure it out. And the case law says the impotent to reverse rule thus embodies an important limitation on the ability of an administrative agency to reconsider its prior determinations, while at the same time affording a degree of flexibility in limited circumstances. The rule dictates that an administrative agency cannot reverse a prior decision unless there has been a change of conditions or other considerations have intervened which materially affect the merits of the matter. A mere change in conditions or other factors is not enough. Only proof of material change permits an agency to reconsider its prior determination. And I thought you might ask, so I've researched whether the impotent to reverse rule applies to expired permits, and I found that it does, and that's at the very bottom of the last paragraph. And I cited Bradley versus the Wetlands Agency, which was an appellate court case. So thank you for listening to the presentations. We'll open it up to your questions. The application team will set that up. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we open up for?
Can I ask Kathleen just a couple of quick comments here for clarification, but the original submission that occurred just for this hearing, did it include the two alternatives? I can't remember if it did or did not.
The original submission from,
I don't mean like from years ago. I mean,
No.
a submission for this.
Andrew had done the extensive review on that.
Did that original include? I know that it does now for clarification, but did it? Do you recall if it did? I don't know that it matters.
Yeah.
I think you probably submitted one package of drawings at this point.
No, to.
Oh, you did?
Jason Edwards. Initial application that we received had one alternative in it, with the second one to be presented when we came.
Okay.
That was the one that you already had, which was 2004.
Okay, so we appreciate the additional submissions being included here. I think that gives us what we need and are asking for. You know, the thing, as I was listening through all of this, I just want to comment that the suggestion was made, or the comment was made, despite the applicant's experts having found the application does not have adverse impacts on the wetlands or water courses. I'll stop even at that point, mid-sentence. That is excellent, and it certainly will help your case in the grand scheme, but it is our commission's responsibility to hear all of this, to ask questions, and to make that determination, not just take it as fact. And so that is perfectly reasonable, I think, for us to ask. And I am looking at our regulations, and I see that on page 14 of our regulations in section 7, 7.5F, a minimum of 2 other feasible alternative site plans that were considered relative to impacts on wetlands and water courses, and an explanation as to why the proposed plan was considered the most feasible and prudent alternative, resulting in the least amount of impact to the said wetlands and water courses. So I think that, just to be clear, we do appreciate that you did provide those, but that was something that from our commission's perspective is a necessity at submission. So I don't think, I think it was kind of presented here as though you went above and beyond even though you didn't have to. And for public record, I think it's important to say that from our commission's perspective, you do have to, and you didn't, but you then did later. And so we are appreciative of that. I just think that that's an important clarification.
And I'm going to make one clarification that it's not from this commission's perspective, it's our local zoning regulations require it. So although there's only certain conditions which require what I'm going to call the feasible and prudent alternative test to make the decision, this commission and our zoning regulations stipulate that they want to see that as part of the application.
That's exactly one of the points I was going to make as well, is that, what I was hearing, which is great, that you looked at the court's prior rulings based on, I think what you were referring to was Connecticut's rules and guidelines, but the Monroe, Connecticut supersedes that, and typically it supersedes it with something more stringent, not less stringent. So I just wanted to make sure that we were aligned on that we go by the Monroe, Connecticut. Kathleen, are my statements fairly correct? So I'll save my other questions, but I just wanted to interject with that.
The other thing that I just want to put on public record from my perspective, and this is in no way a judgment of this application. A lot of work has been done here, and there's a lot of discussion that will follow. There's been a lot of talk about the history of the site and approvals from the past. And there's also been an acknowledgement. I asked a question previously and it was acknowledged that the wetlands on this site have changed since many of those approvals. And so I think we're trying to pull from history, which is relevant in the conversation, but at the same time, things have changed on that site. And so that is part of what we need to review and we need to discuss and we need to make a decision based on. So again, this is just putting these thoughts on public record and follow up to some of that.
That was actually, sorry.
Yeah, so I want to get to you, Commissioner Murray. I'm happy to open it up to additional questions. If anybody has anything that they want to say about that, about my comments first.
And I do have one thing to add to it, which is, and come up, this will be quick, that is actually missing from the history list, is that in 2014, and this is in my comment memo that I submitted to this commission for a brief record review, and the applicant's record review was much more extensive than mine was, so I really appreciate that. Mine was more highlights of from 2024 above, and I did give this commission a physical 11/17 copy of the daycare approval, the site plan from 2004, as well as the wetland mitigation plan from 2013. I also included the subdivision plan from 2014, which had a inland wetland subdivision positive referral. So the entirety of the lot, 2 Victoria used to be combined with the Amazon parcel lot. That was subdivided in 2014. And as part of that submission, they submitted a potential development plan. That potential development plan did include the daycare facility as one of the reasons that they believed it was a buildable lot. And this commission did give it a positive referral with that as the example of why it was a buildable lot. So I do want this commission to have that piece of information when they're thinking about the history.
That is helpful, Stephanie. Thank you. Okay. Commissioner Sabia, any questions from you?
Yeah, I just had a note about the removal of the invasive vines and shrubs. Do you know what plan you have for removal? Is that going to be chemical removal or machine removal or by hand or?
We are going includes huge second put in notes regarding those management methods. We did include both pulling and controlled applications and herbicides. We had both physical and the use of very targeted and strategic use of medicine.
do you know what herbicide treatment you would be using? Do you know what the product
It
is?
hasn't been specified at this point, so it would be with a licensed applicator. And and would be, we have specified, we did, in this particular note, we did specify a glyphosate 41, which is used, it's used in and around areas where there's surface water on the ground. So it's made for use in and near wetland areas. It would not be it would be a cut of stem, stem with an herbicide type of thing, not a broadcast use of any herbicide. And the objective is to use it for a season or two and then be done with it.
Thank you.
Mr. Stewart?
Yeah, some questions for the engineer. I don't see where you're holding back the water quality volume.
I'll have to verify with my report for that. We have a separator unit, and I believe we also have retaining water.
All the tanks, all the discharges and all the inlets are all basically the same elevation, so. I understand, but if it's not flooding, that thing's gonna let everything through, so if you would just look into that.
I'll verify that for you. I'm 90%.
Next, have you looked and found out what the groundwater elevation, the seasonal groundwater elevation is in the area of all this work?
Yeah, we've done some test bits out there. It should be, there's soil test results in the stormwater report, so we did take that into account.
Okay, so you're not below the seasonal groundwater elevation, okay. Your hydrodynamic separator you're proposing, that invert is right at the elevation of the bottom of all these tanks and all the outlet. Can you just confirm that, obviously you don't have to do it now, that system still works when it's potentially underwater all the time versus having some pitch?
I know one of my engineers has been working with James on all that, so I'll get.
Okay,
My town engineer DeMayo is on the meeting via Zoom.
or is it, oh, it's over there, I'm sorry. And then the other question is there a reason why you connected your, terminology correctly? Your detention system to your compensatory underground system and not directed it to your detention pond or your compensatory pond and looped it through that direction so you get some additional treatment on your way through as a thought.
Yes, good thought.
And last one, is there another location for the dumpster rather than putting it right near the wetlands? I guess his parking lot's pitched towards the catch basin anyway.
If you see a spot, we can explore, move it.
I'm looking for you because I know it's obviously you got to get trucks in there and you don't want it right next to the front door. So if
We'll take a look and see.
and you got wetlands everywhere, so I don't have any great ideas, but if you come to one, I'd love to see it. Thank you.
Commissioner Zamri?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much to the three of you. This is great presentations and an extraordinary amount of detail that's been put into this. So I want to thank you first of all. And I won't repeat the comment I had before. I think that's on record. The other thing is, just to kind of address, I think we heard there was some change in the wetland. I think, as kind of was said, is we just want to understand the material nature of that change, right? So we'll get to that eventually. And then just a couple of questions for my own edification, as I just tried to internalize this drawing a little bit. There's a lot of lines on it and whatnot. So what I tried to do is understand where you have mapped out the wetlands, where the FEMA boundary flood line is, which looks like it's going right through the building. And then lastly, upland review area on the north side of this diagram, right? Because I see it on I see it on both sides, right? So if I look at that, it looks like potentially the entire building, or at least most of the building and the parking lot, is at least within the upland review area. As a matter of fact, if you look at the eastern corner of the parking lot, the upland review area no longer exists because it's within 100, probably 150 feet of the watercourse, right? So there is no upland review area. It's right into the, okay. So I just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly,
I think
right?
there may be a little sliver in the middle, but with the 150-foot setback in the river, I think we are totally in.
Okay, good. I thought so, but I just wanted to make sure I read it correctly. I don't think I have any other questions or comments at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Smith?
I'd like to mirror what Mark just said. You did a very good job of this proposal and a lot of good backup. For Mr. Kenny, I'd like to ask you, so, sir, do you know how big the parking lot is? How many feet it is, square feet? How much?
Roughly 17,000,
17,000, and another 10, excuse me?
a little less.
Another 10,000 for the building. So you're saying to me, you're saying to the commission in your report that even though we're putting in 27,000 feet of impervious surfaces, that there's no adverse effect on the wetlands. This is all in the upper review area, but the heat sink of that parking lot, I mean, perhaps you could help it a little bit by putting you have some 8 by 30 foot ends to the middle aisle. You might think about taking some of the plantings, and I applaud the planting. I was very happy to see this plan, but maybe putting some trees in those islands, something to do. But I got to tell you that it doesn't sit right that it's totally unchanged or it's slightly improved by this project. And yet we've seen that slab have an effect, and that slab wasn't even close to 27,000 square feet.
The slab that you're referencing is that the slab from the building that was removed? The previous, the
Right.
one, when we consider impacts to wetlands, we consider what we call direct impacts and indirect impacts. And direct impacts are from activities in the wetland itself. So that slab, I can't tell you there was a wetland there before, but the wetland shape was affected by the presence of that slab. So they may have filled and built that into the wetland back in the day, and that would have had a direct impact for sure. Or that's certain. That is an example of a direct impact. And so that physically altered the land and eliminated habitat, where now all of our activities are outside the wetland. And that's why the state has both a very thick manual for soil erosion and sediment control and a thick manual for stormwater management, stormwater quality management. Or otherwise, without those, you really couldn't approve virtually anything that comes before you. There would be some projects, but because when you look at stormwater management, and the potential for impacts to wetlands, if the activity isn't in the wetland itself, it's what are you doing in that upland area that could potentially affect the wetland? And it's often related to water movement, where you might have to put in an impervious surface. We're all very familiar with, as you increase impervious surfaces, you increase pollutant loadings. And so the state recognized that as we increase impervious surfaces, they looked to studies that have been done all over the country and all over the world, and they found that, one, if you keep your impervious less than 10%, then they found there's much literature in the studies that are available that show that you could pretty much avoid impacting the stream by just keeping your impervious surface below 10%. And that's even in the most recent water quality manual. It's in the manual from 20 years ago, and it's in the manual that they just published last year. But so once you go above that, then you want to collect and clean it. So then they looked at the studies of all these BMPs, and they're constantly studying these, and the state of Connecticut and all the states around the country and the EPA have been actively reviewing those, and they've found that when you design these BMPs, these best management practices, to collect the water and clean it, that you can then avoid these indirect impacts that could result if you just built a parking lot but didn't collect that water and clean it, and that water went to the wetland and then it would impact the wetland. So, like you look at, for example, the parking lot for the Amazon facility, and perhaps that's more than 100 feet away, but when you look at the acres and acres of that versus what we have here, they're all found to be acceptable if you're using these BMPs. And the manual just came out. They had 20 years to make changes, and they still came out with a manual and said, here's the BMPs. They refined different BMPs and refined different standards, but they still said you can proceed with development in the landscape if you do it in a responsible way and use best management practices like we have here, like that are in the manual. What they found that if you use these best management practices, then you can protect the waters of the state, the wetlands and water courses that are downstream. And then we recognize that there's potential for other impacts if, for example, but primarily from water. And it's often you focus on stormwater, but it could also be sanitary discharge. If we didn't have a septic system and just discharge to the river, that would be terrible. 50, 60 years ago, that's the type of thing that caused many, many problems. But now there are very good standards for this, for both sanitary and for stormwater. So that beyond that, you're left to perhaps, sometimes you might have to clear a large forest area and you take an area that's shaded, deep shade, and now all of a sudden it's exposed to sunlight, and that could change. You often end up with more invasive species and things like that. This area has been already cleared, but we recognize the benefit of the shade, and that's why we're focusing on planting a lot of trees and getting the forest. And then the specific concern you mentioned about the heat, and that's a very valid concern. The infiltration that's proposed is really good for managing that, because we're collecting it, we're putting it underground, and then having it go infiltrate into the soil and just slowly make its way to the stream. And by doing so, it's going to correct or moderate, mitigate the heat. That if you had collected it and put it in a pipe and discharged it directly to the river, that would be an indirect impact. But by collecting it, infiltrating into the ground, we're able to reduce the temperature and avoid those impacts.
Okay. I appreciate what you said, and I especially appreciate your comments related to the application of herbicides. But I can tell you that glyphosate 41 is, if I was taking fish out of the pond near Victronics, I wouldn't want you using any kind of herbicide like that. The difference between that and Roundup is Roundup's 50.2%, as opposed to glyphosate versus this 41 is 41%. But in order to do the cut stem method, you have to add a harmful, a surfactant to help it adhere to the plants and the surface that you're cutting off. That surfactant's even worse because it lasts a little bit longer, and this is an all-in-one, non-selective. And I appreciate your comments, because it sounds like if you were the guy doing it, boy, I feel much more confident. but it's written and is in legal.
If you would prefer, we're pleased to remove the use of herbicides.
I could tell you that, because it's all upper review area, there are at least 40 times a year where we get over 1 inch of rain here in Monroe. The difference between the upper review area and the stream doesn't really exist. You get 1 inch of rain. So, I'm just saying that, I'm worried about using too much and I appreciate that you're saying you're going to do minimize it, but, and it's all, of course, you're going to do it consistent with federal, state and local requirements because you're not going to get in trouble on this one. But I just have a little difficulty with glyphosate 41. I wish there was something else. But like you said, hopefully it's really, really minimal. I don't know what else to say to you, about it. I hate it. But, most of the, sometimes you don't want to wage a war that you can't win. And if you take out some of the invasive species and you don't fill it in as you are proposing, even in the wetlands, you have some trees and I do applaud your planting plan.
So I do have a question for staff, if I could kind of pivot while it's still in my mind. The commentary about the language related to the impervious surfaces and the reference to the handbook, is it reasonable for us to request for the applicant to provide us? I mean, I suppose we could go find that documentation, but is it reasonable for us to ask Mr. Kenny to provide that to us as?
Yeah, I would say he'd provide an excerpt from it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't need it. Yeah. So I would like to make that request, just in relation to that language around the impervious surfaces. I think it would be good for us to see that. Not that we don't take your word. I assure you we do, but.
And at the DEEP's website, it's available as a PDF.
Yeah, I think just, and I appreciate that, and I know we have access to it. I think in the context of the application and the discussion, it would be helpful for that to be submitted. My only other question is just for Jim, for town engineer Jim DeMayo. I understand that you're still are you there, Jim? I want to make sure I've got you.
Yes, sir. I am here.
All right, excellent. How are you? I just wanted to make sure I understand that you're still reviewing. I know you submitted some comments and you received some back. And I think we'll probably have to come back to those. I know it's a pretty extensive list. I'm curious if you have any commentary that you think is relevant for us to be discussing or looking at tonight, just in preparation for the next discussion.
Yes, sir. So to catch you up on where I am, I completed my first round of review. I know that they resubmitted information. I have not yet been able to get back to it to do my second review. But I will give everybody my main concerns that I saw. Some of the stuff about the water quality, that's some of the stuff that I picked up on as well, that I was looking just for more information. In terms of the parking lot, this is something that I want the commission to kind of understand, because I do think it is a bit relevant. Floodplain is not really a wetlands concern. It's more of the planning and zoning. However, one of the main concerns, and I think the applicant should speak on this, is the parking lot would be underwater, I believe, based upon my first review. So contaminants or anything in the separators or things like that would actually kind of come up. So that just, if they want to speak on that. We're working through all the floodplain, compensatory storage and that type of thing, and the volumes there. Another concern that I have that's wetlands related is the playground. I didn't hear much discussed about this. What materials are going to be on the ground? Is it going to be a rubber? Is it going to be grass? Is it going to, what is, how is that going to be finished? Also, specifically, how is that going to be graded? They probably addressed it in the revised plans, but basically, the original plans didn't have enough spot grades to tell me where exactly that water's going. Aside from that, most of the other things were things that can pretty much be worked out. Some technical things, nothing that changes things too much. Yeah, so those were the main things that I had.
Recognize to the applicant that this review process is ongoing. Do you have any commentary or anything that you feel is necessary right now in response?
I have two questions. Can I ask?
Absolutely.
There's a conceptual subdivision plan. Just for housekeeping, I want to make sure we vote properly. Are you guys asking for a wetland referral for the subdivision to planning and zoning as part of this? Okay.
We're gonna have an application for that.
So we'll make sure to review it. So just for this commission, they have a conceptual subdivision plan that's included at the beginning of their drawing package. It shows a proposed property line, a new property line going straight in the middle-ish of it that will be subdividing both the lots because there are wetlands on both of the properties. In addition to the vote about the regulated activity, we would also do a vote for a subdivision referral to the Planning and Zoning Commission once the subdivision got in front of them. So I do want to make sure that this commission is looking at that in that respect. I'm not an engineer. The compensatory storage, the concrete underground retaining galleries, if this whole thing floods, what makes that not have pressure to like pop out of the ground? Like I know that when I worked with structural engineers to design like swimming pools in FEMA floodplains, like we have to do a significant amount of additional adherence to the ground in order to make sure that that structure, because it is some sort of a bowl and this is a more encased structure, doesn't pop up.
We'll address that.
Okay.
I think that was something James had brought up too.
That's it.
Great. Okay. So at this point, does it make sense for us to open?
I think you had given the applicant the opportunity to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I have a couple of plant-related,
Sorry.
couple plant-related comments. One, I was out there on the site, so I inspected the site. It was not the right time to see, but as far as invasive plants go and the eradication of invasive plants, I didn't see any evidence of yellow flag iris, Phragmites. I think that the invasive plants that I was able to observe at the time that I was out there were fairly easy to eradicate by hand and without chemicals. I know we had already kind of talked about that, but unless there's something in there that I'm not seeing, I don't see any reason why it has to be, why chemicals have to be used at all. Furthermore, going further into the area where you're eradicating invasives, I would make the suggestion that we're pulling out and replacing with something native and appropriate for the conditions. And then just a basic comment about fertilizers and pesticides, fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides. I know this is a daycare facility, and I hope we have a long-term goal of not using them at all, even in the future. I see it's a pretty low maintenance design that's there, right down to the meadows. I'd like to see what the maintenance on the meadows are. If there is a plant disease or infestation of insects, how is that going to be dealt with in the future so that pesticides aren't used in the future? And is it a matter of removing plants that have been infected and replacing them with something else? So more of a long-term goal of how to deal with invasive blights that may come in the future. And that was all I had.
I'm sorry, did I hear, because I think maybe we're talking about the same thing, but did I hear that there was an offer not to use pesticides?
Yes.
at all?
Yes.
Like, I think we might want to consider that as opposed to saying reduce the number, right? Because if the offer's already out there not to use them at all.
I would say if there was a plant like Phragmites that had taken a hold in there, it would not be feasible to attack that invasive without.
That's fair.
But I didn't, so my point is I didn't see anything in there that would warrant the use of any pesticides. I think it could all be eradicated by hand. It's a little more labor intensive, but
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I apologize. So if there are anything that needs to be addressed from the applicant, be happy to.
I was just going to say the applicant's already is willing to agree to it, no chemical removal for the invasive. So I think that was a good suggestion, and we'll adopt that. The other thing I just quickly noticed, because I was reviewing the 2004 approval. It does. I mean, maybe with the help of staff, we can investigate this a little bit further. But it does reference the abandonment and removal of buildings. The abandonment and removal of buildings previously described in the letter for IWP number 02-10. Kind of, they say have been removed from the site. I'm sure they're just talking about the vertical portion. Obviously, they still had a ground portion of foundation to remove as well.
Jason Edwards for the record. This is actually for Jim. Just to clarify what your comment was on the Jim's mail. The worry, you're concerned about the contamination of the floodwaters with what exactly are you referring to there?
I'm referring to, so what I'm referring to is the ability for the floodwaters to work back into the stormwater network or go from like the catch basin into the hydrodynamic separator and pull it out backwards and pull it back up to the surface. Or, conceptually things like that, or even just come right out of the manhole lid.
You're worried about in a flood condition though?
Correct. I'm only referring to in the 100-year flood condition. If the parking, again, I haven't reviewed the revised document, so I don't know if the parking lot is actually out of the flood elevation now, or if it's still under. But if it's under, how are we kind of making sure it doesn't back up and then go out and be released in a manner that we're not trying to let it release.
Understood. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. We'll make sure we use that. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. We're ready to open to the public? Okay, so if anyone in the chambers from the public is here to comment, pro, con, or indifferent related to this application?
there's a sign-in sheet up there. If you could write down your name, address, and then state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Millie Rizzio, and I'm one of the owners of 8 Maple Drive, which abuts the property over on the left-hand side. My question is really, and I don't know, I may not be addressing it the way I should be, but in regards to the septic and the fields, they're going to be on the other side of that roadway. Was I understanding that correct?
Same side of the roadway, but driveway, but farther up towards Raptor.
So I think we want to side of the driveway going towards your property. It's on the other side, the uphill side.
Okay, yes.
Well,
You guys answer
So
that.
now,
you have
here's
to
a
come up and speak.
because
You can answer that so that she's directing it at you.
She has to address the commission.
Yeah. And
I think it's appropriate, yes, I think it's appropriate, though, if you're comfortable with them coming up, you can ask them to come up to respond to it.
Sure.
Yeah, if you could, Mr. Evers, I appreciate you just coming up just to address that formally.
Yes, you're correct, in that the septic would be.
Septic would be on that side. Okay, and the fields are also, and it's pumping up. Okay, that underground pipe that's underneath that little roadway, that easement, okay? Underground pipe that's under there that then goes into that wetland area. That's closer to the front of the property.
You're talking about a drainage pipe or a water?
There's
Water
a,
main that goes up there.
there's a drainage pipe that actually comes in from Main Street. And it's about in this area right
It's actually
here.
further back.
Yeah, it's about right here. And then what it does is it actually causes a brook to go in this way. Is that going to have any runoff from the septic and the fields?
I think it's further up than the picture. It's farther away. We know where it is. It's on our plans. It's farther back.
Yeah, because I don't see it on here.
Yeah. it's
And I don't see that brook on here either.
I think Bill that described where it came through. It's right around there.
You're thinking it's right around here?
It's farther up near the property line. Yeah, the pipe is right on. It's right on the property. I think it crosses over.
You think it's right here? Yeah, it's not right here. Okay, the pipe is actually right around here. Because I just stood and I took pictures of it about an hour and a half ago.
Maybe you're talking about a different pipe.
Well, it's about a 3.5, 4 foot opening, round pipe underneath. Okay, and it actually feeds from Main Street. And so that's what I'm kind of a little bit worried about, the septic and the fields, and this pipe draining all this water that's right around here. That's what actually causes this wetland here, is that pipe. Oh, I just took these pictures and you do not have them. So that's my concern. That's one of my concerns.
If you do care to send those to our staff at town hall, we can have those.
Sure, we can include them as part of the record.
And do you, along that roadway, based on the amount of water that because that doesn't have anything, that roadway in regards to drainage on a side or gutters or whatever you want to call them. Is anything going to be done in that area so that it doesn't create more water?
Are you referring to what's called the existing access drive?
Yes, that's what I'm referring to.
Okay. And I assume your property is southwest of that. Yeah, down.
Right there.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
And then it wraps around to Maple Drive, which is located on the other side.
I'm sorry, I put it here. How do I go back? You should have stayed here with me. That pipe is not there. That pipe is a lot closer to the street.
Staff will be happy to go out there and take some pictures, investigate where that pipe is, and submit them.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
So that was probably my concern, or, with the way it is, and the amount of water that's going to run off into this retention pond, to the left-hand side really is nothing to, that piece up here, that roadway is, right here. This particular roadway is much, much higher than this area. So this becomes more of like a flood when it rains a lot. I mean, I've seen that really, I mean, there's been lakes there, you know, so. I mean, the area that was removed up here was the concrete area. It was probably around about a 50 by 100 concrete area, would you say?
Honestly, I don't know how big
Okay,
it
it's
is.
about a 50 by 100 concrete area that's here. That then became wetland once the concrete area was removed. Because concrete area was approximately, I'd say about maybe 1.5 feet off the ground level, if anybody remembers it. Okay, so that became wetland once the concrete area was no longer there. You know, so those are my concerns. And how is this drainage going to be set up so that my particular land doesn't become more wetland than what it already is? I think somebody needs to go out there and take a look at that pipe, take a look at the elevation in regards to what the parking lot, what the building is going to be, what the playground's going to be, because it actually may need some retention over on the left-hand side also. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the chambers that would like to speak in regards to this application? Anybody online? Any hands raised?
And again, friendly reminder to use the raised hand function
*9.
or *9 if you're called in via telephone. We don't see
Nothing
anything.
online.
I think because there are still a number of open dialogues with Jim, we probably need to continue this to the next meeting.
What's the next meeting date?
The 14th, April.
So it's there's 5 Wednesdays in the month of April.
Okay.
So it's not in 2 weeks, it's actually in 3 weeks, which is May 14th.
Be back for that, so. Okay. Thank you. Okay. With no motion for that, right? Okay. Moving on to our next public hearing. It is IWC 2021-06R A1, file number 1376, 64 Cambridge, 4 Independence Drive. Proposed modification to reduce net fill quantity and modify the method of wetland restoration. Astro Land Holdings LLC and Spacely Land Holdings LLC applicant. Mary Blackburn, Solely Engineering LLC representative.
Going to do have to read this one also into public hearing. In accordance with CGS Section 8-7D, a public hearing will be held on Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. Soon thereafter via hybrid Zoom. And in-person attendees located at Monroe Town Hall, Council Chamber 7 Fan Hill Road, Monroe, Connecticut 64668 concerning the following. IWC 2021-06R-A1, file number 1376, 64 Cambridge, 4 Independence Drive. Proposed modification to reduce net fill quantity and modify the method of wetland restoration. Astro Land Holdings LLC and Spacely Land Holdings LLC applicant. Mary Blackburn, Solely Engineer LLC representative. This was also published in the Connecticut Post, April 9th, 2025, and April 16th, 2025.
Thank you, Commissioner Sabia. I think if I could hand it over to staff, I think there's some clarifications in terms of our proceedings tonight.
Yes, so friendly reminder to the commission that this is an amendment to the original application, IWC 2021-06R. There is an intervener on this project who filed a petition as part of that original application, and we are continuing it as part of this application. So we are going to move forward with the applicant presenting their application. And then at that time, I just asked the chairman to invite the intervener to present anything at that time. After that, we can have questions from the commission and then open it up for public.
So to reiterate, we will have the applicant present and we will have the intervener present, then we will ask our questions. After the back and forth that is necessary, then the public will be engaged. Okay. Terrific.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional in the United States and Solely. Office is located right out right here along Main Street. This record keeping, I want to submit some proof of mailings and also flash drive. Thank you. Some information was submitted. So we're here tonight to talk about both applications to modify inland wetlands 2021-02RA1 permit application. So this is another site that has quite a bit of history. I know some members of the commission have been involved in previous proceedings. There was a lot of discussion regarding this property. So I'll give a very brief overview of some of that history to bring everybody up to speed. The site itself is located at it's part of Pepper Street Business Park, so it's pointing everybody. 25 runs north south along the. There we go. So Route 25 runs north south along the western side of town. Pepper Street does a loop here. Comes up. This is part of the site is comprised of two parcels, 64 Cambridge Drive and 4 Independence Drive. So the plastic is located right here. Cambridge Drive, so this site has gone through quite a bit of history. I'll try to keep it brief, but happy to dive into as much as the commission may want to hear or discuss. The site was originally approved for 2 industrial buildings back in, I believe, 2006 by a previous owner, previous applicant, completely unrelated to the current owner or applicant. That approval was granted, started a significant excavation operation, went considerably beyond the limits, both width of the property and depth of the excavation. And that's when, and after that had taken place and had been ongoing for an extended period of time, that owner moved on from the property. The current owner applicant acquired the property, and first thing we did was come into the town, helping restore an issue that was caused by a previous owner. So that was 2006, that project was approved. In 2014, or 2015, excuse me, there was an approval to modify the subdivision for Cambridge Drive. So this is Cambridge Drive, Pepper Street is right here. Cambridge Drive was previously approved to kind of come further into the site. 2015, that was modified to create a cul-de-sac in this location here. This work was actually fully completed earlier this year and accepted by staff. Included the installation of a cul-de-sac, a driveway into a portion of the property, 64 Cambridge, the construction of a municipal stormwater basin and wetland plantings, and that has been completed and accepted by staff. Part of that, you can see there's landscape plantings, some wetland plantings, buffer plantings that was all done and established and accepted by staff earlier this year. Fast forward to, it actually started in 2020 when the current applicant and owner acquired the property. there was a lot of impact to the property from the previous owner. So we actually came through multiple hearings. And the previous owner had conducted activities well beyond what was previously approved, and it impacted the wetland and had considerably reduced the watershed to some wetland soils that are on the east side of the property. So I'll orient you with some pictures, but let me go back to the aerial, you can see it better there. So this site was all excavated. It was essentially a quarry operation for many, many years. And there's a wetland system to the east, which is up at a higher elevation than the area that was excavated. Within this wooded wetland system, there are a few vernal pools in here. And then there's also a wetland system to the west side of the property in this location here. Now, the primary impact associated with the previous former activity had to do with excavation that essentially eliminated a watershed that had previously been draining towards this upper wetland system. So when we came in support of the new owner, we wanted to understand what the real impact was, and it was really determined the impact associated with the previous activities was the reduction of the watershed that fed this easterly wetland system at a much higher elevation. We first came to the commission in 2020 with an application to actually raise the grade considerably along the northern edge of the property. It had proposed over 800,000 cubic yards of import fill to raise that grade. The Wetlands Commission at the time actually determined that that was too much fill, it would take too much time, and they denied that application. We then went back to the drawing board, met with the commission, tried to determine what we felt the best approach was. And then in 2021, we got approval for a reduced import, approximately 490,000 cubic yards, which was going to still restore a portion of that watershed along 4 Independence Drive. That's up here to the north. So we were going to raise this grade considerably to provide some superficial watershed to restore this wetland system. We also have the construction of a swale within that regulated area, that buffer up at the top of that rock cliff. So there was more disturbance there. And really it was an opportunity for us to try to clean up the rest of the site to make it something that could be productive and much less of an eyesore and a scar on the land. That restoration approval was approved at Planning and Zoning in 2001. We then went to the the Wetlands Commission. We then went to the Planning and Zoning Commission. We received approval for an excavation and fill permit that mimicked the same approval from wetlands and allowed us to raise that grade, import approximately 490,000 cubic yards of material. That application, both applications were highly contentious due to one abutter. There was tremendous opposition. There was an intervener, as Ms. Gallagher mentioned. I believe they'll still be part of the discussion of this application. However, despite the approvals by the commission, appeals were taken. The wetlands approval was upheld. They determined that their claims of environmental concern were not founded. So the wetlands approval was upheld. However, the Planning and Zoning Commission approval did have a snag, because in the planning and zoning regulations at the time, as part of an excavation and fill permit, there were a series of items that the commission could waive. And it was clear in the language, the commission may waive these requirements that were meant to apply to any excavation and fill permit. In accordance with the regulations, we had those waivers granted by the commission. When that approval was challenged in court, courts came back and said, planning and zoning commissions can't grant waivers. It can only be done by ZBA. So we had to go back. We actually went to zoning board of appeals. They granted us the variances. That approval was challenged. That approval was upheld. And then, so we were able to get an excavation and fill permit reapproved in 2023. That was consistent with the wetland remediation plan. And subsequently to that, we actually went back, and the commission, Planning and Zoning Commission, modified their regulations to eliminate that waiver language, so that future applications wouldn't be subject to the same potential legal challenges on a technicality, really, and granted the commission the ability to process future excavation and fill permits the way that they're empowered by statutes to do. So So to summarize, in 2021, the Wetlands Commission granted our approval to proceed with this work, which did include the import of approximately 490,000 cubic yards. It allowed us to clean up a lot of stockpiles that were on the property, fill in some of the deepest holes, and begin some of that import process. And over the past several years, the site has been cleaned up tremendously. As part of those, both wetlands and planning and zoning approvals, because they were so contentious, the town required that the applicant hire and engage a third party that the town selected to actually go be on site, monitor what was happening, make sure that everything was appropriate from an environmental standpoint. I believe Bill Heupel from NSAFE had presented to this commission in 2023 and gave this site and all the activity on the property a complete clean bill of health, that there were no impacts, there were no environmental concerns. All of the allegations that have been raised were unfounded. There was no real cause for concern whatsoever. As part of this process, while we were intending to clean up the site, start to import material, there would be a temporary rehydration of those upper wetlands by the use of mechanical means. So we were going to install, we were going to basically pump clean water from the lower elevations of the excavated quarry portion of the property into that upper vernal pool. And we're actually very proud to say, and Bill Kenny, our soil scientist, is here, and he'll add some color to this later. But that activity, that mechanical means of rehydrating that wetlands and not actually raising the grade fully to allow it to drain sufficiently, it actually did result in positive impacts to those wetland systems. So it actually, I believe, well, Bill will talk about it more, but there was evidence of vernal pool obligate species returning to that pool, evidence of standing water. So that mechanical means of rehydration was successful. So, which brings us to where we are today in our requested modification to this permit. So, over the years, the site has been cleaned up. I'll go through some pictures and demonstrate that. But the pursuit of fill to actually raise these grades has proven to be incredibly challenging. One, the availability of that much material hasn't materialized. Additionally, as part of the planning and zoning approval process, there was a materials intake protocol that was agreed to by the applicant, which wanted to ensure that no potential environmental contaminants would be brought in as part of any of that import material. And frankly, the majority of, or if not all, of the opportunities where fill did become available, it couldn't meet that strict requirements that were established in that fill intake protocol. So we're at a point now where it is incredibly challenging to actually source all that material to complete this import of almost 500,000 yards of material within the timeframes that are established in the excavation and fill permit. And since the site has been cleaned up in such a tremendous way, there is interest from potential users that would want to come and actually develop this property, make it a contributing economic impact in the community, improve the tax base, et cetera. However, in order for any future application to come before both this commission or planning and zoning, the excavation and fill permit needs to be closed out. And we aren't in a position to close out an excavation and fill permit until we met all the conditions associated with that. And the attempt is to secure and place almost 500,000 yards of material on this property hasn't materialized. So what we're proposing as part of this modification is we're actually proposing to modify the wetland restoration approval as before the commission to eliminate that fill requirement and to install a series of permanent wells to continue the rehydration of that vernal pool through those mechanical means. And we believe that based on the activities that took place during the construction process that proved that wetlands could be rehydrated through pumping, we think a permanent installation would be a far better approach considering the other challenges that we have. So that's the application before the commission in a brief summation, but I will go through now. So we're proposing to essentially leave the site as it's currently established, eliminate the requirement to import additional material, raise the northern portion of the property, 4 Independence Drive, But we also want to clean up some other areas on the site as part of this approval to close this out, and I'll go through those areas now. But first, I want to touch on kind of some of the existing conditions and show the commission how improved the property looks from what it did as part of the previous applications. I didn't bring old pictures. I'm sure the commission may remember, since it was very highly publicized, but I wanted to kind of show the commission some pictures of what it looks like today. So this is actually that one of those cryptic vernal pools to the upper east side of the site. This is at a much higher elevation than the excavated activities. You can see there is evidence of standing water. It is still able to function as a vernal pool. It's just making sure that it gets the volume of water that it needs to do so. This is a little bit further north. There's a key in this left hand. So this is a little bit further north. One of that same cryptic vernal pool. Again, this is considerably higher in elevation than the area of the site that was excavated. This is up along Independence Drive, looking south towards Cambridge Drive. So you can see this is from this vantage point here. So that wetland and those vernal pools are up at the top of this rock face. You can see the considerable grade change between the existing grade today and where that wetland is. So again, we're trying to eliminate the need to have to find and place nearly 500,000 cubic yards of material. And I will say that during the previous applications, a lot of the concerns were the material that could come in could be contaminated. So we do believe that eliminating the need to import the fill does address some of those concerns that were raised as part of the previous applications. This is actually looking, so this is kind of standing Independence Drive and be at your back. There's actually a municipal stormwater basin up in this location here. This essentially collects and gathers and retains stormwater from the construction of the business park itself. So this holds stormwater from both Independence Drive and Enterprise Drive. This is kind of from that same vantage point, but looking again towards the east. So again, this is that existing rock face. Those wetlands and cryptic vernal pools are up at this higher elevation here. Independence Drive would be essentially right in this location here. So there is a drop off from Independence. However, there's a fence along Independence, and I know there were some comments raised from the town engineer about making sure we had adequate protection there, and we believe we do. But again, the previous approval had this elevation being raised well above this, so that water would drain sufficiently. We requested of the commission to break this modification so we don't have that requirement, and we believe again rehydration of those wetlands via pumps is an adequate solution to that. This is looking towards Independence Drive is up here. That municipal stormwater basin is up in this general location. So this is looking kind of from the center of the site towards the west. Just a little bit further south along the site again, this is looking west. Enterprise Drive is beyond this ridge. This is looking at just an area of the property in this corner here. There's all this area was previously disturbed, and a lot of it is there's some vegetation reestablishing along the property. There's wetland systems further down the slope past this limit. This is looking at one of the sedimentation basins, detention basins that was established as part of the cleanup of the property. So this is kind of looking towards Cambridge Drive, a little bit to the right. And then this is again looking south. There are some material stockpiles that are still there. We are requesting to maintain those because they will be used on the site, or they would be used on the site as part of future site development. But again, most of the area have been cleaned up. To the specific plans themselves, in accordance with the requirements, we have a survey. This actually represents the current topography as of December of last year. There hasn't been any other activity on the property since. The biggest change, obviously, was this former elevation before our approvals were granted, or I think around elevation 380. This has been raised to elevation 420 or so. So there's been, and just cleaning up the property, the lower reaches of the excavation have been able to have been filled and raised. And that's what was reflected in those pictures I just showed you. So again, we're proposing to eliminate a lot of that grading that was required, eliminate that swale that was being proposed to be constructed at the top of that rock face within the wetland buffer. And again, to install a series of wells that would be both solar powered, have battery backup, and the alarm to ensure that the flow rate from those pumps are adequately sized to ensure that these wetland systems can be rehydrated. And then there's some miscellaneous cleanup proposed across the property related to some of the existing sedimentation basins and detention basins. So we can go through those now. So this is an existing detention basin located right here. So there's just some proposed measures to extend some of the spillways in between a sediment forebay and a larger detention basin to make some adjustments to the outlet control structure to ensure that that flow is regulated appropriately and accordingly. This location here, there was a sedimentation basin established where we just want to put in some additional stormwater management measures to ensure that we have adequate level spreaders, sediment spillways on those basins to ensure all that stormwater is managed and established in the appropriate way. In this location here, because this area is a little bit lower in elevation than down here, we do have a series of stormwater so that this area can drain down to a low spot here and then be carried and conveyed through pipes and discharge into this detention basin. So we are just proposing head wall or forebay right there to collect that water. And then in the southeast corner of the property in this location here, we had another sediment forebay. We just want to provide some additional construction measures for that spillway and then install the level spreader for the actual discharge of that basin in accordance with what was previously approved. We have a soil erosion sediment control plan included in your package. We have all those details in accordance with the deep requirements. The site is currently covered under the stormwater general permit with DEP and also an industrial or stormwater discharge permit for industrial activities with DEP. We are doing the required inspections and ensuring that those soil erosion control measures are being maintained in accordance with the requirements. From a landscape and a planting standpoint, we did have some areas where we wanted to continue and finish those plantings that were approved as part of the So this is that basin. If you come into the site, here there's some more basin proposed and just consistent with what was previously approved as part of the previous approval. As you continue further north on the site, we have some additional wetland mitigation plans to be proposed in areas, as previously identified. And then we do have some two small wetland mitigation areas, which were included as part of the previous approval. On Ford Independence, which is the property to the north, we are proposing to install some substantial plantings and vegetation, and also create so on Ford Independence to the north, which is this location here, we need 1,400 areas, which is again part of the previous approval. And then in the southeast corner, in that basin, we're proposing a 64-foot drive to create 1,250 square feet of wetlands, again, consistent with the previous approval for the property. So we are proposing modifications to that from what was previously. As part of the permit set, we did include sections that demonstrate, sections for the property. It's all the planning zone requirement, but we did include those. With that, I'll actually turn it over to Chris. This application in how those wetland systems have responded to the
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Steve Finn. Pardon me without my jacket. I'm an attorney. I've been involved with this property since right after the original NOV was issued. And so I've been involved in dealing with the intervener. The intervener has appealed all 4 approvals we've gotten before Monroe Land Use Commission, and has made the same arguments for everyone. I just want to fill in a couple of gaps. Kevin, good job of giving an overview. It's in your packets, but the WPA, which is a very respected environmental firm, has tested this property repeatedly, including the groundwater, including materials at the property, and found no significant environmental contaminants or nothing worth being concerned about. WSP, pardon me. Thank you. In addition, the intervener has reached out to DEEP on a number of occasions, complaining about this property and raising concerns about it. DEEP did send out representatives to the property, asked for additional documentation, and to date has found absolutely no violations existing at this property. As you know, WSP tested the property before we started bringing in fill in connection with the remediation approval with regard to the NOV. Bill Heupel monitored all the material that was brought and made sure it met the material acceptance procedures, and did report to this commission, I believe, the Planning and Zoning Commission, that the property had no issues with regard to the extent of the project that had been completed at that time. One of the things that I want to bring to your attention is that with regard to the original application before this commission, that one sought to bring in 900,000 cubic yards of material, but it also included a development plan. And this commission, in its wisdom, rejected the idea of combining a remediation plan and a development plan. So then we came back with purely a restoration remediation plan. That one was the one that was approved by this commission, appealed to the Superior Court, and the Superior Court denied the appeal of the intervener.
Upheld the approval.
Upheld the approval, correct. Last point, if you look at the record and you look at the complaints that have been raised by the intervener throughout this entire process, they have come down to concerns about the amount of fill that was being allowed to be brought to this property to perform the restoration remediation, and concerns about groundwater. All those concerns are addressed. We're not bringing in any more. There is no risk of, if you were to approve this plan, the intervener's concern about more possibly contaminated material being to the site evaporates. It's gone. No more material is being brought to the site. So that addresses the intervener's major concern. I suspect they're going to come up with different reasons now to fight this project. You can speculate as to why that might be, and perhaps my client may want to address that at some point. And then the other concern, it was about groundwater. Again, this property has been tested repeatedly. And in addition, hydrogeologic studies indicate that the groundwater on this property does not go beyond this property. In addition, the intervener has never bothered to test any groundwater on its property to demonstrate there's any contamination of groundwater on his property. So granted, I'm anticipating what the intervener might or may not say, but I wanted to get that out for you by way of background. And now, unless you have questions for me, I will turn it over to Mr. King. Thank you.
Should we let them conclude?
Let's let them conclude on that.
Good evening, Bill Ken. Professional wetland scientist, soil scientist, and landscape architect. So I've been involved with the project since the immediately previous application for restoration. So then at that time, back here again with regard to the proposed modification to that restoration or remediation. So I just want to share with you just a few topics. We'll start with the wetland delineation. Then we'll talk about the condition of the wetland that had been impacted from the quarry work and what we found over our review since the 2020 and through present. Then we'll talk about our objectives for restoring that, which are primarily putting water back into it, adequate amount of water to make it meet the definition of a wetland again, as well as a vernal pool, which they have different requirements. And then I'll get into the methods that were proposed in 2020 and the methods that's proposed now to achieve those objectives. And then go into a little bit more detail. With regard to the delineation, we mapped the wetlands in 2020 and then we took another look at it this spring. And what I found is that they are substantially the same. All the work that was, except for one change on the ground, but otherwise all the work was way outside of the wetlands. It was within the quarry footprint where wetlands don't exist. There's some temporary stormwater basins there that don't meet the definition of a regulated wetland as they're temporary. However, as I mentioned on the project for 2 Victoria, which includes the creation of a basin and how that, I believe that'll become a wetland. This project, as was described, within the last year, had a stormwater basin constructed in the cul-de-sac in the southern portion of the property. Down here at the cul-de-sac, and that stormwater basin is a functioning wetland now. And under this Connecticut state law, it doesn't matter whether it's man-made or natural. So that would, we would flag that today. Even though it's a very young and new wetland, it has sufficient amount of water to meet the definition of a wetland. So there's a contour. We've put it in our report, but because it's a flat bottom and it has a contour around the edge, and that contour is the boundary of the wetland in that area. So there's one change on the ground. There's also one change, and actually that change on the ground is not called out on the project drawing, so we should add that to the project proposal.
Yeah.
Unless,
So this is,
wrong.
no, so this is all the way down here.
Yes.
In this location, so it's really on, so this is the end of the cul-de-sac. There's a driveway to the property, so this is actually, there's a wetland system that kind of hugs both sides of this driveway to this property. It's on the opposite side of any of the area where we were focused from an excavation standpoint. So it's well beyond the limits of what's really established as part of this application.
Then in the northeastern corner of the property, there is an isolated depression up here, and the wetland scientist that worked on the property before the quarry was established, he mapped this isolated area as a wetland and identified it as a vernal pool. We agree that it functions at a certain level as a vernal pool, but it's an interesting situation. It doesn't hold water long enough to create wetland soils. So I agree it's a vernal pool, but in my professional opinion, it's not a wetland. It's not related to anything we're proposing, but just for the record, in 2020, I called that out and forgot to remind Kevin's office that, in my opinion, it shouldn't be shown as a wetland. It should be shown as a vernal pool, but not a wetland. It still needs protection. So it's just I was asked to say where are the wetlands, and that's my, so, but for the vast, for 99% of the wetland boundaries on here, I find them to be the same as they were in 2020. So there are these 4 wetland systems that exist on the property. One is this relatively large system in the western portion that comes around, in the southern portion, the access drive goes up between it down here in the southern portion. And that's been called out as Wetland 1 ever since, I think, 2014. We have been using that term in 2020 and again now. This had a vernal pool that was identified over all the years as being able to support the breeding and development of obligate vernal pool amphibians. And that vernal pool is down on the southern end of that wetland. In the northeastern corner of the property are 3 other wetland systems. There's one here that's considered Wetland 2 and Vernal Pool 2. So you have these vernal pools that are within the wetland boundaries. In general, the wetland limit is wider than the pool itself. And the pool just happens to be an area that's wetter than some of these outer limits of the wetland. And this gets back to the objectives for restoring a wetland. The threshold is much lower with regard to how much water is needed in that wetland system than what's needed to create the vernal pool. W2, VP2 is right here. This area flows to the north. And what you have here is you have ridge lines, bedrock ridge lines that run north-south. And there previously was a ridge line down the middle of the project site that separated W1 from W2. Then there was another slight ridge line, or there still is, that separates this W2 from W4 on the right here, and this little isolated VP3, previously known as W3, in my opinion. So there's a slight ridge between W3 and W2 here in the northwest corner. So the watersheds for 4 and 3, because you have a ridge line on the left, just right between it and 2, that watershed hasn't been affected. And then there's a larger watershed off-site to the east, and that wasn't affected. So these 2 wetland areas continue to function, or vernal pool areas continue to function as they have for decades, or for as long as they've been studied. This is a forested area. It's their quality wetland systems. The pictures that Ken had showed were quite appropriate. There's little to no invasive vegetation in here, a great ground layer of forest floor of native vegetation, and a great shrub layer and understory trees and canopy trees. So the problem is in VP2, Wetland 2, where more than 50% of its watershed was removed when they took that ridgeline and dropped it. So they dropped it below the wetlands, so the water that used to flow from west to east ended up in the pit. And for many years, it was pumped, I think, to the west when the quarry was being used. So when we first came on the site in 2020, I walked through this wetland. What is going on here? Because often, I've never seen a wetland drained in this fashion. For 30 years I've been doing this, it's often that people put drains down through, they dig ditches down through the middle and drain water away that way. Or they lower the water table by just intercepting groundwater moving to the well. But I've never seen an earthwork activity where it removed the watershed like this. And so the wetland is still there, the vegetation is still there. It's been because it's been dry for so long, because there's a fair amount of organics in the soil that accumulated. When that soil is saturated for long periods of time, the decomposition of leaves and other organic material is much slower when it's saturated, so it starts to build up. And by being aerated for a long period of time, some of those organics can decompose. But the trees and shrubs and ferns and sedges, for the most part, are also there. You won't see there. It's really a beautiful wetland. So in 2020, we said we want to restore this by bringing water back to it. And so at that time, it was, we'll recreate the watershed and collect that water and direct it back to it and restore the wetland. Pool. It was acknowledged that that approved plan, because there was so much fill needed, was going to take 10 years or something, some extended. So the thought was, what can we do in that interim of 10 years to prevent further loss of organics and things like that, and restore breeding habitat in the vernal pool? So there was the proposal to pump water to it, and that was done intermittently. We did monitor the results of that, and particularly last spring. And there was two major concerns at that time, and they were very good concerns. There was a concern, did that water disappear? Was that wetland dry because the watershed was gone? Or was it dry, or perhaps in addition, was it dry because the blasting fractured the rock below the wetland? Because that wetland is there because the rock is a bathtub holding the water. And it's a perched wetland way above the regional groundwater table. So what, by chance, was that rock fractured and caused it, just broke the bathtub and the water just drains out. So there was a concern about that. And then there was also a concern, if you refilled it, if you build it, would they come? And so, and that being the amphibians that breed in the vernal pool. So our monitoring, those were the two major things we were looking for, was would this hold water, and when it holds water during breeding seasons, would the animals that are in that forest use this for breeding? And we did find one, we found that it holds water. And two, we found wood frogs, obligate vernal pool species. We found their eggs in the pool. So we were very happy to see that. Because, and I felt confident that, because that everything is there for that wetland except the water. So I just felt that it was a very good chance for the success of the vernal pool to bring it back as a functioning resource. So we found that we were able to achieve that with the pumping. So with this, we were approached when the applicant came to this conclusion that they wanted to not bring in as much fill for all the reasons that was described to you. And so we took a look at the pumping, and we did put together an evaluation. It was only submitted to you today, but we looked at, well, first, the objectives is one, to restore the wetland hydrology. And to be a wetland, wetlands range from a dry end to a wet end. And the minimum on the dry end is you just need saturated soil within a foot of the surface for as little as 2 or 3 weeks in the spring. That's the minimum you need. So technically, if we could provide that, we'd recreate this wetland. But for the vernal pool, it's not 2 to 3 weeks, it's 2 to 3 months of, and not water, groundwater, it's surface water. So you want 1 foot or more roughly in water. So it's a much more water. So if we can restore the vernal pool, we automatically restore the wetland. With the type of vernal pool, we want to, because vernal pools provide different functions with regard. Most people think of them, and their highest benefit, in my opinion, is the ability to support the breeding of these amphibians that live out in the forest. And that's when you need the 2 to 3 months. There's also other animals, such as the fairy shrimp, which is its little invertebrate that That's the only thing that's been found in that vernal pool 3, which doesn't hold water long enough to make a wetland, but it ponds long enough in most springs that it allows the population of fairy shrimp, these very small animals, to live in it. And you pretty much only find these fairy shrimp in a vernal pool. So that's how that area meets the definition of a vernal pool, just from the presence of the fairy shrimp, and not from, it doesn't support the breeding and development of frogs and salamanders. So getting back to, we want to restore the hydrologic conditions for both the wetland and the deep vernal pool hydrologic conditions to support the breeding of the amphibians and frogs. So we evaluated, we wanted to find out how much water are we talking about on a monthly basis, and we did a water balance calculation using average values for over a 25 year period. We looked at average precipitation depths for over a 25-year period for this region on a monthly basis. And then we looked, so that's our input, water coming into the system. We're going to apply this to the area of watershed we lost. So we're going to say this amount of water falls on that watershed we lost. And then you're going to lose some of that water through evapotranspiration. So we took values, that would be an output. And we took the values, average values, again, published values. And we have our references in the document I've submitted. And we subtracted out that, and that comes in inches as well, depths of loss of water. So we subtracted that out. Then we applied that depth that was remaining to our watershed area to come up with a volume. And that's on a monthly basis. There is another potential output, and that would be groundwater. We are taking the assumption that in this, both the watershed and the pool is underlain by this bedrock, and that it's a shallow mantle of soil above that. The water goes through the soil, hits that rock, and makes its way to that wetland and that vernal pool. We're being conservative by not, if we lose a little bit of water through a crack in a rock, we're being conservative. We're saying that we're not losing that, so we need to provide that with the pumped water. So we're adding more water than possibly needed. So we end up with a volume based on the watershed size. That's for a monthly, and then we using standard type, what you expect with a well capacity, wells that are drilled in this area of like 5 to 10 gallons per minute. We looked at that over a day, and we decided to use 15 gallons per minute as a value, and then multiplied that through our volume, and came up with a certain amount of days for each month of how much water we pumped in there. So at the start of the month, you'd start, and it varies by month. Based on primarily the evapotranspiration. The amount of precip is pretty similar each month on average. So we would pump based on those monthly values for a certain amount of days. And what's most critical is we would go out in the spring for several years and to calibrate this. And what's great is that vernal pool 4, which is immediately to the right, is a great benchmark. So we would, we know we need water to be there for 2 to 3 months. So we would monitor it, and if we needed to adjust the flow rate of the pump, we would do that. And to ensure that we have inundated surface water conditions in the wetland sufficient to support the breeding and development of the amphibians.
So with that, we're happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
If it is okay, I think we would like to just take a 5-minute recess.
Of course.
And then we're going to let the intervener present, and then we'll address it. That work?
It works.
Thank you. We're back. So if we could, we'll have the intervener present. You could just introduce yourself. We'll take it from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, staff. My name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport, law offices of Grady Gross. It's my pleasure to appear before you this evening on behalf of Peter Metropolis, trustee. Mr. Metropolis owns the budding property, large tract of land at 136 Timothy Hill Road that directly abuts the subject properties to the east. I'm not going to take a lot of time tonight. I want to just deal with a few housekeeping matters, if I may, to start. I trust that the commission, first of all, is going to hold this matter open after this evening and hold a public hearing open, because I don't know how the commission does it, but like 500 pages of documents have been filed in the last, I think, 2 days, and I just haven't had a chance. I haven't read them at all because I was out of the office for part of the day on Monday, and I was tied up the last 2 days. I had a hearing in Fairfield last night, so I can't address those matters. But on another note, I wasn't sure, and I didn't have a chance to speak with staff today. I had actually called to speak with Christy earlier, but I missed her. I was in depositions all day. I had submitted the record from, the earlier record, because I wasn't clear on sort of procedurally how you're going to handle this. But it sounds like the entire record is already incorporated, and we're just going to continue the original pending application, as I understand it.
Yeah, it's so even like the number you'll see is like A1. So this is an amendment to the existing record. So we would consider this a continuation.
I appreciate that. So understanding that this is going to be held open, I just have some high-level comments I'd like to offer. And I know that, yes, this has been a long and twisted road with this application. I know Commissioner Stewart can attest to that. And we've all grown old with this. It's gone on for a long time. And I don't want to debate the sort of the litigation. And I heard Attorney Finn get up and talk about our appeals. And there are 2 appeals pending right now, but I don't think that's of interest to the commission. So I'm not going to get into the sort of the merits of these appeals. I wanted to address, there was a comment made on the appeal from P&Z that it was kind of it was turned over on a technicality. It wasn't like a gotcha moment. It was something that I had argued before the commission from the get-go, where I argued that the commission could not waive these standards and the commission shouldn't do it. And they disregarded, the commission ended up waiving these standards. And as I predicted, we ended up on appeal and it was overturned. But that's neither here nor there. Significantly, I will say that one of the appeals that's pending right now, and we're actually awaiting a decision, involves an appeal of the excavation and fill permit. And one of our claims in that case is that this is a solid waste and disposal facility that's been operated on the site because the applicant has admittedly received construction debris, concrete with rebar in it. They have processed materials on site. They've crushed concrete. They've extracted rebar, and they have disposed of it off site. So our position is that this has been operated as a facility in violation of the Connecticut general statutes, the deep regulations, and so forth. But once again, that's a matter that's before the court, and the applicant can say that that was minimal, or they were dealing with the actions by the previous owner. But the fact of the matter is, from a high level, this applicant is a sophisticated developer. They bought a site that had been over-excavated, severely over-excavated, dramatically over-excavated, and I disagree with the memory of some of the consultants who spoke this evening, the original application involved over 1 million yards of fill needed to fill that crater. And that application was ultimately withdrawn, but the point I wanted to make is the applicants seek to distance themselves from the previous owner. And the position of the intervener is, first of all, the applicant knew when they bought the site that it was over excavated. And despite the applicant having this theme that everything was done by the prior owner, that's not the case. This applicant, the ball kept rolling and it kept happening, and the actions of the previous owner continued after these applicants had acquired these properties. And if you have any doubt, and we disagree, so I'm sure this characterization is going to continue and we disagree on it. But if you have any doubt, then ask yourselves why Monroe Land Use, after this owner owned the property, 6 months later and 9 months later, had to issue notices of violation and cease and desist orders. And that is because these activities continued after this owner had the property. So my point is, these applicants don't have clean hands walking in with this application. Is the site cleaned up? No, the site is not cleaned up. There was a reference saying, oh, the site is cleaned up. And my client is deeply concerned about the impact of the activities on the groundwater. And I understand the claim. We don't agree that there has been adequate testing here. We don't agree with that. So now where we are is you have an applicant that appeared before this commission, made representations about what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. And we spent dozens and dozens and dozens of hours on this. And this commission thoughtfully went through a long analysis on this and spent a lot of time and agreed to this plan. And this was the second or third iteration, and a lot of time and thought went into it. Now you have the applicants, basically, they're coming before you and they're just saying, fill is hard to get. They were running an operation on this site, basically where the material that went off the site was being sold. The over-excavated material was being sold, including by these applicants. They sold the material that had been illegally quarried. And they were receiving materials and getting paid to receive materials to fill the site back up. And then once the site is filled back up, they would sell it. And there was an agreement that 900 and some odd thousand cubic yards of material from off-site and on-site would go into this hole and fill it up. And now, basically what's happened is you have an applicant saying, fill is hard to get, but there's also commercial interest in the property. So we can do half the job, leave these slopes, leave this mess. And sure, some of the wetlands are apparently doing well. Of course, we're not talking about the wetlands that were obliterated on this site as part of the original activity. But now we have a buyer. So don't make us do everything that we agreed to do and let us sell the site in a half remediated condition. And I'm urging the commission to not do that for a lot of reasons. And we'll get more into the substance of it after I've had an opportunity to review the materials that have been submitted. But I think it sets a horrible precedent where there's a violation and a violator can basically come in and make a commitment and sort of, thank the commission for allowing them this opportunity. And that's what happened here. And now come in and say, I'm only going to do half the job. And what we said before doesn't count. So with that, I don't know if the commission has questions for me. I'm curious to hear from staff. I read some of the comments and that's all I have for today.
To the question of the continuation of the meeting, I think, see how this all progresses, but I did see that there were some files that were handed over.
Yeah, there was
Solely,
information that was
We
submitted
haven't seen that yet.
solely, and you had submitted the past records, so
So my material, I guess, is duplicative of what's already in the record.
we're gonna put it in the record, we'll have it in the files. I don't think we're gonna print it and distribute it, but if anybody needs it, we actually have a very, holistic view of all that stuff. If somebody from the commission needs it or someone from the public needs it, please come to town hall and,
But I think a lot of the material wasn't posted on the site till yesterday or Monday.
Yeah, and we also got stuff today, later in the day too, so.
So the
Yes, I think
continuation is,
staff recommends we continue it to the next
And I mean,
meeting.
I think that the submission on Monday was like 500 pages of material from Mr. Solon.
And I think today's submittal, I think there was even more.
Oh, so I haven't even,
Yeah, no, I don't think
that's fine.
staff.
Yeah, that's something you don't need to worry about.
thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for your patience. I don't know if you have any questions.
Yes, I think, why don't we start out with questions for the applicant, if there are any, and then we'll see how does that make sense in terms of procedure?
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Smith, we can start with you. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Sully, would you allow a site visit?
Of course.
Set that up, please.
Absolutely. I'd
Check
imagine.
your pictures, don't get me wrong,
Yeah, no, it's better to get eyes on, absolutely.
I agree. Nothing else?
Commissioner?
And you'll want representatives there for the second.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
we'll talk.
I'll put out an email and see who wants to go. And we'll coordinate it.
Chairman, I'm sorry. Is there still going to be public comment tonight or,
There will be.
I mean, my client may want to speak to the commission.
So that after we go through our questions, we will open it up to public
Thank you.
comment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm still trying to internalize everything, especially now after, hearing a little bit more. So I think I probably really want to see a little bit more of the documentation before I structure any of my questions.
I did have something else. Just to clarify, what is currently going on as far as pumping? You're still actively pumping based on a need for the water?
So one of the issues in finishing the cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
And finishing that paving and finishing everything with utility providers, because there's been no activity, they terminated power to the site. So the well that had been previously used to pump no longer has a power source. So part of this application too enables us to proceed and install this permanent well with the solar power to give us that ability to commence that pumping again.
So you are pumping based on need?
No, we had been pumping, but because as part of the finalization of the cul-de-sac
Yeah.
and the closeout of that permit and the coordination with utility providers, they terminated the power to the site.
Right.
So that pump that was there and previously powered, but the activity is all stopped and ceased, that pump no longer has power to pump that well.
Right. But we could use a different pump source besides electrical. I worked in an open pit mine. We pumped out water on a regular basis because we were gaining water on the bottom of the pit and we couldn't expand it. So that's how we got rid of water, and it was.
I mean, well, right now, the way that the site is stabilized, there really aren't the way that the site had, the way that the activities proceeded in accordance with the current approval, those large areas of standing water are no longer there. So like during that activity, the northernmost reach of the site, that was the deepest hole that had standing water. As that fill was placed, we dewatered that clean water, which had been tested and verified to be clean. That was pumped up to the wetland, and that's what demonstrated that the resiliency of that vernal pool, we then reestablish, have vernal pool algae species, have egg masses, things like that. But since that deepest area has been filled, there's no longer standing water. So to your point, at this very moment, there is not pumping going on, which is why we want another reason why to get this approved.
Right, so VP
installation.
So VP2 is drying up, is what we're saying.
As of right now, it's not being pumped.
So it's drying up.
Well, right now, it's devoid of any watershed restoration. And that was, yeah.
You said you want to reserve questions until later? Commissioner Stewart?
Okay, so your approval was for how much? 400,000?
490,000.
How much did you bring in?
There wasn't much brought in. A lot of it was moving all the stockpiles and spoil piles that were there.
How much?
I don't have the exact volume of what was imported.
You filled up an area of 40 feet, right? So,
Well, there were, if you recall, the activity was left with considerable stockpiles of.
yeah, but not 40 feet of material.
There was, between the.
If you could do your survey and come up with an amount for us.
You have those volumes on the plan? Yeah, there was about 240,000 cubic yards of material moved on the property.
How much was brought in?
Based on a comparison of the topo from 2020 to 2024, 70 yards. So
You only brought in 70 yards of fill.
there was 239,000 yards of material that had been stockpiled and it had been moved and processed and placed under the observation of
Okay.
NSAFE.
Thank you. Okay, so it's been a long time, but from what I remember from the approval, you guys were supposed to report back to us on a regular basis.
Yep.
I remember one report
I mean,
in I don't know how many years.
that reporting was coordinated through the town and the prior administration. And Heupel from NSAFE. And he came and presented to both Wetland and Planning and Zoning, I think in 2023. I'm not sure, obviously there was a changing of the administration, so perhaps.
I'm just thinking that, because I'm judging what will happen in the future by what has happened in the past.
Well,
So I just would love staff to find out what that original approval included as far as reporting, and have they done that? Because I remember one report from in the last how many years? I may have been absent or whatever. Okay, so originally, when you came in with the plan, you came in with 900,000, you cut it to 490,000. From what I recall, you said, well, we need this fill to develop the site, we need this fill to hydrate the wetlands. Now, all of a sudden, you don't need the fill. I guess I'd like to see a concept plan of how the site gets developed.
So if you could.
Okay, I don't need to see it tonight, I don't want to go back over, but I want to see that you're going to be able to develop the site.
Yep.
And then I'd like to see a chart showing a timeline showing when the wetlands were being rehydrated. How long were they being hydrated? When was it turned off? Why was it turned off? When did it start? Because I was in the impression that the whole application was, we want to start this right now. We want to prove everything is good. We want to prove we can do it. Everything's good. And I don't know how much you actually did it. We never got reports. I never saw, this is a nice picture, but I don't know when that was taken. To me, it's worse to have a vernal pool. It's wet one season and all the frogs are running down saying, hey, great, we got a place to mate. Let's do it. And then next season it's spring and it's dry. So then they're dead and then you start up again the next year. So consistency is the most important thing to me. If you're not going to be consistent, I don't know why we bother. And then the other question is, what was the limit? What was the problem with the soil requirement we had for the soil that made it so you couldn't get any?
The intake protocol?
Yes.
I can get more information as to why the.
What was that item that we said you couldn't have that made it so you couldn't get any soil?
I'll get information from the applicant. I'm not sure.
And then my personal opinion, and it might be too early to say this, but if I agree with this, I would expect that there would be a significant bond to ensure that this thing is maintained. Because I did that and I still have my doubts that you would maintain a system as complex as this. Not that I know of any other solution, and I'm not, I don't know that it's not a bad idea, but if it hasn't been maintained in the past, I'm not sold that it's going to be maintained in the future.
Thank you. Commissioner Sabia, any questions?
I'm gonna see with the site walk and some of the other documentation that was added, and then I'll come up with some questions.
Sure. I am interested, just two comments, but the first, I am interested in that reporting as well. I was not here at the approval of that application, but I was here in its aftermath. And I do what Commissioner Stewart is saying. I do, it's a very valid question. I do think maybe they came and presented to us twice. Maybe it was only once, but also I do believe they were communicating with staff on updates. And it was a question of, do you want us to continue to come in and present in the meeting? And I don't recall. I don't, it's long enough ago that I don't recall. Okay. My only other question, I know that there is a document in here with the applicant communicating with town engineer Jim DeMayo, and I don't know if I see we still have him.
Yep.
Curious if there's, again, just to echo the question from earlier, is there anything, as these exchanges are occurring with you and the applicant, anything that we should be taking extra time to review? Any concerns or questions that you think are relevant to highlight at this point? Jim?
Yes, sir. Yeah, so James Maritime Engineer. Us engineers must think alike, because me and Commissioner Stewart have some similar concerns of, when we approved the recreation and reestablishment of the watershed, it becomes a passive way to feed the wetlands. Meaning if no human intervention happens in the future, it's gonna be maintained. By introducing mechanical means, it comes down to who's going to be following through on this, who's going, like, future maintenance, making sure it continues to function the way it's supposed to. I'm not talking about 2 years. I'm not really even talking about 5 years. I'm talking 10, 20, 30 years down the road. Um, is kind of where the concern is. I mean, the bond idea is a good idea, but it also depends upon the type of bond. Um, and then again, is there ever a sunset? How often are we going to be requiring inspections of this? Is it going to fall to staff? Is it, you know what I mean? There's a lot of, like, the logistics with the long term, that I have some concerns with. From a wetlands perspective, one thing that we should focus on as well is the water quality coming out of the well. Um, the well water could have a different composition than what you would typically find in rainwater or surface water. How does that impact the wetland? Could it be harmful to certain species? Could it not? Who's gonna, at what parameters are we going to feel comfortable for various levels? Are we gonna want our own, consultant to review something like that? Um, the overall concept of the site, I'm not as worried about. My main focus right now, or main concern, is just making sure that that wetland stays a wetland and that vernal pool stays healthy. Um, the applicant did address one of my concerns about scheduling. I know that they resubmitted a bunch of documents as well. I haven't looked at their scheduling and how they're going to dose it. One of the other thoughts that I had while I was listening was they are proposing one point of discharge into this wetland. I don't know if it's valuable to have multiple points of discharge due to the fact that this is a big body of wetland. And if, you know, if you have a watershed, water's getting contributed across this entire area, whereas now you're point discharging to one point. Long term, is that going to have any major effects? But those are just my main big concerns, and my focus is really on that one wetland. I don't have much in the way of major concerns for the others at the moment.
Okay, thank you, James.
Yep.
Any follow-up questions for the applicant?
We got this today. It's tough to.
Also, if there are any questions for the intervener, we also can address those now. Is there anything that we want to highlight in that regard? Or if the applicant has any response to anything that the intervener said and you want to address that?
You know, obviously, we would expect it to stay open. We look forward to Attorney Green getting the opportunity to review the materials and hopefully offer commentary on the merits of the application and not just a lot of the assertions that were made.
Yeah, I guess I would just comment, you know, there were a lot of assertions made, right? And I think I liked, and I think we like to base our decisions on fact. So if there's any backup documentation as to anything that was discussed, that would be very helpful for us in terms of the volume of material and what happened when, if there's any pictures to support any of that, but really mostly, you know, just kind of backing up some of the assertions that were made would really be helpful. Otherwise, it's difficult to kind of consider that in a decision. That's all. That's all.
I think one thing we did to kind of close out the end of the last sets of permits, we had an exhaustive presentation, all the documentation from the DEP, all the testing results. We can certainly rehash that for the commission to show you the exhaustiveness that was done, the quality of the results, the correspondence from Deep saying we don't have an issue when we've been out here multiple times, and even the reporting from NSAFE that I believe Commissioner Kelly and Stewart had the benefit of seeing, but some other commissioners have. We can certainly provide some summation of that so you guys can have the same comfort level that we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's your prerogative, what you want to do. I'm just giving some, you know, some of my thoughts. It doesn't mean the other commissioners feel the same way I do. But you may want to address some things. Sure. And you may want to address some of these things as well on the other end, right? So I'm just telling you, I based my decision on fact, right? That's all I'm saying. I can't speak for anybody else. I think everybody does, but that's all. That's the other comment that I make.
Okay. So at this point, I think it makes sense to open up the public portion of the hearing. I'm assuming there's nobody in the chambers that would like to speak, but certainly if there is, feel free.
Is it okay to ask how many folks are online, or like, I'm not sure?
1, 2, 3, 3 plus James.
Okay, 3 plus James. Do we have any raised hands?
No raised hands.
Would anybody online like to comment?
Please use the raise hand function, or if you're calling in via telephone, star
9.
9. I
Or 9.
don't remember if it was 6 or 9.
Took me a second.
No.
Not worried about that. So you did say that you're, that you may have someone that would want to speak in a public nature in regards to this online, is that?
I think that under the circumstances, we're gonna wait till the next session.
Fair enough. Okay. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to.
Thank you. And it would be helpful if, under the circumstances, if the applicant copies me on submissions as the interviewer.
excuse me, to the commission, it would be nice if we got a copy of the petition for intervention. I have not seen it. I don't believe you sent it to me. Could you send that to me?
I believe we're relying on the.
We're relying on the original one since this is an amendment to the original application.
Okay.
So they didn't submit a follow-up petition. Unless for some reason, after reviewing the material, your claims in the petition changes for some reason. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the only other point I have is you may need to give, maybe you know this, you may need to give notice of the site visit.
Oh, yeah.
It depends on how many people want to walk the site.
Oh, to the intervener, you're saying?
No, we would have to notice it if we have quorum and we have to notice it as a special meeting and go through
Yeah, I
it.
just want to make sure.
It just depends what the numbers are. And we don't have a full commission tonight. So there's also the question of if the two commissioners that are missing are going to sit and watch this whole meeting and review all the materials, of which case, as long as they've brought themselves up to speed, they can also, so we don't know if they're interested in a site walk at all either. But yes, if
You're on
there's
top of
quorum,
it. That's great.
if there's quorum, it will be noticed as a special meeting.
Thank you.
Gonna hold their eyes open and watch this on.
But just like what I mentioned, weight doesn't matter as far as the amount of paperwork you put in. You don't get more credit for more weight. In fact, if you could, be as concise to the point, that was really appreciated. Thank you.
So I think we can formally say that we are continuing this meeting, this hearing to this.
May 14th.
The May 14th, we will do a site walk. Again, as mentioned, if there is quorum, we will notice it as a special meeting, and that means the public has to have access to the site. We will coordinate that with the owners. That information changes things.
Okay, terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Okay. So moving forward in the agenda, there's no deliberations tonight, no bond release or reduction requests. So we move on to IWP Agent Activities Report.
Agent Activities Report. First item I have is IAA-25-7, file number 1531 is 26 North Road. This was an agent approval for a 10 by 12 storage shed within an upland review area. So I issued a permit to construct a 10 by 12 storage shed 25 feet away from potential wetlands. This storage shed is to be set on a gravel base to be placed on top of an established lawn. The gravel will extend 1 foot in all directions to take care of any runoff from the shed. That'll act as stormwater retention. 4 inches of gravel, 1 foot all the way around. Conditions of the approval were silt fence to be installed and inspected pre and post construction. No heavy equipment was to be used. It is surrounded by wetlands, so no bringing a tractor in there, setting it down. It's they build it on site, and for wetland markers to be installed all around. Second item is IAA 25-8, file number 1532 is 54 Chalk Hill Road. This is a 21-foot round above-ground pool within the upland review area. I issued a permit to install a 21-foot round above-ground pool. It's only 20 feet away from wetlands. I did this for Make-A-Wish Foundation. This is we did investigate other locations because it's only 20 feet away from the wetlands. Nice, viable, healthy wetlands. But this is really the only location for the pool due to the septic tank, the septic fields, and the wetlands. The location, it's established lawn. It's abutting healthy, viable wetlands. There is a planting berm already there in between the established lawn. It drops down to wetlands. There's a little planting berm already there. It's been there. So that stops any sediment from going down into wetlands. I had a couple of conditions of the approval. which was silt fence to be installed and inspected pre and post construction. All excavated materials were to be removed from the site. They do have to dig down and install. So they dig down. I asked them to haul all that material off-site so it doesn't wind up down in there in the wetlands. And part of the conditions were no backwashing or discharging of the pool water into the wetlands. So that's on the approval. It's not something that we could really monitor. Talking to the pool company, and I've never heard of this before, but I did speak to the pool company about this, and they said that the system that they are installing never requires backwashing. It's a filter they take out, they bring it over to the driveway and hose it off. He further went ahead and said that it wasn't even DE, it's not even diatomaceous earth. I'm not familiar with the system, but even if that didn't take place, there is 1 foot of gravel all the way around, and it is stormwater managed practice to backwash into that, and the gravel that's underneath the pool holds the water before it goes and gets filtered into the wetlands. Questions on that? Comments, question? Okay. IAA 25-9, file number 1533 is 648 Fan Hill Road. Redesign of Fan Hill and Hammertown Road intersection. It's to improve both the sight lines and the traffic flow. So we all know Fan Hill and Hammertown Road. It's a very hard turn. So the town is taking on the project of redirecting that and changing that intersection. So it's going to be more of a T intersection instead of a weird kind of turn. The drainage swale that's on the side of the road triggered the need for a permit. So I issued an agent approval. Permit for the improvement of the intersection, as there really are no real wetlands on the site. And the conditions of the approval were to put up silt fence, inspect pre and post construction, and all disturbed areas were to be stabilized with conservation seed mix.
And Andrew, I'll even add, we're actually pulling the road further away from that drainage swale. Because it's currently it's a Y intersection, and we're teeing it up. So we're actually pulling the road further away from any potential concern.
And moving on to voluntary compliance, I had a couple of voluntary compliance issues.
You added some.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. The Christiana Drive.
80 Christiana.
IAA 25-11, file 1535.
I did not put that. Okay, so 80 Christiana Drive. Emergency removal of 6 to 7 dead standing trees, some in wetlands, some in upland review area. House is sitting in established lawn surrounded by woods, some of which are wetlands.
Stumps will remain in place.
The stumps are to remain in place.
The left side of Christiana, driving away from river towards the dead end side of Christiana, is that right?
Toward the dead end side of Christiana, yes, and off to the left. Right. So yeah, conditions of the approval or to leave stumps in place, not to do any more disturbance. I did go out there, take a look at them. They are standing dead. If they weren't leaning toward the house, I asked them to leave them because dead trees are still a food source. But the 6 to 8 trees that he has flagged for removal, I completely agree. It's a safety concern. Sorry, I didn't pull that file. Moving on to voluntary compliance. 40 Pamela Drive, removal of a stump and the associated grading with removing that stump within an upland review area. Complaint came in So I issued a request for an inspection. I went out, I inspected, spoke with the homeowner. They didn't realize that they're in upland review area. It was a large stump that had come, the tree had come down years ago. He just pulled the stump out of the ground, but in doing that, disturbed a lot of the soil. It is up against wetlands. I issued them a voluntary compliance, and part of the voluntary compliance was to plant 1 tree, 4 shrubs, stabilize the soil with conservation seed, and install wetland markers along that line. Would anybody have liked to see anything different? 29 Hemlock Lane, removal of storm damaged tree within the upland review area. A complaint came in, active tree work being conducted, which is in potential wetlands. I went out when the complaint came in. I ran out, I took a look at it. There's very healthy, viable wetlands down there. But turns out that the work was being done because it was a double leader maple tree, and the 1 leader came down this way and was actually hung up in another tree and hanging over the house. Neither one of them were really aware that they shouldn't be there, but it was an emergency situation. So I gave them voluntary compliance. I did have them scale back the scope of what they were supposed to be doing. So there were a couple of other trees that I told them, really, you don't need to take that down, so leave it. I also had a talk with the tree company to let them know that when this comes up, they should be informing the residents that it's wetlands, and there was no question that it was wetlands, and they should have known that.
What was their response?
What's that?
What was their response?
Was that they weren't aware of it, and they will from now on.
Remember that. You run into that company again, please.
Yep. And the homeowner was perfectly willing to put up wetland markers so that in the future, if she doesn't own the property, everybody knows. I didn't see, it's a very heavily wooded area. I didn't see any reason for them to plant anything. I'd rather them just do no more disturbance than what is possible. Also, they weren't using heavy equipment, or they weren't using equipment in that area. So that's all I had on that. Correspondence, I have a couple items for correspondence. Go right ahead. We have a letter from 68 East Village Drive. I figured I'd just read this into record. This came in the other day. This came in dated April 10th. Mr. Brotman, as you requested in your recent letter for, everybody remembers what 68? Okay. As you requested in your recent letter for a response by April 10th, and as I stated in the commission hearing last evening, I will not be moving forward with any activities on my property in regards to the supposed violation called out last year. I will be seeking legal counsel and holding my stance that the modified plan that was submitted, the town permit granted by the wetlands and the town engineer to my contractor and signed off was followed within the parameter granted, and that the on-site inspection that released my contractor from the site with no issues will be the stance I will be taking. And that any review of the area must demonstrate that I have caused any issues to the wetlands. I will let you know through my counsel our objection. Cliff Cusio, signed Cliff Cusio.
Do we have that signed off document?
Say again?
Do we have that signed off document that was referred to?
When he's talking about signed off, he's talking about the DPW permit.
Yeah, right. So not to correct this one at 10:30, but just really quickly, is it still our position then? We set a deadline for when we would start delivering applications, and now there is a legal process theoretically.
My opinion is leave it. Leave the deadline in place.
Yeah.
If he has a change of heart, give him the opportunity to have a change of heart.
Yeah.
And then we'll move forward after that.
Yep.
And I believe that is beginning of July, if I remember right.
I
think it was the beginning of July.
That was June.
I thought we moved it to June. It was originally July.
It was just.
Yeah.
It was originally July when we were talking about an application.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll follow up in beginning of June and see if he's done anything about it. I'll even tap him another email when it comes to that time and just let him know that his deadline is coming up. And is
You can
there,
just remind him.
Yeah.
That deadline, we acknowledge his letter.
Okay.
That deadline still exists.
yeah. Okay, done. And then, under correspondence again, I got a letter from Ganem Law. This was in your packets. It's requesting an extension of I-09-02, file number 627, 118 Main Street. It was an approved application to remove a residential building on the property and turn it into commercial. It's all been approved. He's looking for a time extension, another 5 years. And I'll just read you the letter that he sent. Dear Chairman Lindstrom, regarding the above referenced Inland Wetland Commission approval and on behalf of the property owner, an extension of this previously granted permit is requested to be extended for an additional 5 years pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 22A-42AG. Said statute, as amended by Public Act 21-163, allows for Inland Wetland Commission approvals may be extended for up to 19 years. So that public act that he's referring to was an act during COVID where he was allowed to extend an already approved project going back 19 years. So he's already gotten, if you'll notice here, he's already gotten extensions. This will be his very last extension that he can apply for. This went to our town attorney back in 2023, and without reading you his whole statement here, his summation at the very end was, the request for renewal pursuant to the statute is timely and is ripe for consideration by the commission for a further extension of the permit pursuant to the statute. As set forth above, the statute requires the commission to renew the permit to a date not later than July 22nd, 2030, unless the agency finds that there has been a substantial change in circumstances that requires a new permit application or an enforcement action that has been undertaken with regard to the regulated activity for which the permit was issued. He's advising that it's good until 2030.
You want to take down a residence for commercial purposes, change it to commercial.
Yeah, he wants to take a residential home and turn it into a business.
It's already zoned for both?
It is, yes. Yeah.
It wouldn't be zoned for both. It'd be zoned
It's-
for one.
it's zoned-
I'm assuming it's zoned for business. I don't know that actually. My computer's dead at this point.
Yeah, this is right next to L&R Power.
Yes, it's to the right of L&R Power.
That's just to the left, just FYI.
It's to the right
Okay, so
of
it's
L&R Power.
This town
orange
has a
out.
tremendous amount of residential properties, like residential's in, there's a single family home where a resident is living in it and it's not a residential zone. Like we have a bunch of industrial zones and things like that, so that it would not
It is a
surprise me.
business zone.
Yeah.
It is a business zone.
What is the reason that they want another extension? Why couldn't they have gotten this work done?
Because they haven't done anything with it yet and they're entitled to an extension. So they're asking for the time extension that they're entitled to and they'll get to it when they want to.
Entitled.
That's what the regulation says. It says that they have up until 2030.
The only question I have is it says unless the agency finds that there has been substantial change in circumstances that require a new permit application. Have there been any? I mean, without seeing an application, how do we know that?
There's been no changes to the property.
Nothing, no shifts.
Nothing.
Expansion of wetlands or anything.
Nothing visually that
Wait, and when was it set to expire?
this was set to expire this,
When was it granted?
Yeah, this July.
When was it granted?
it was granted originally.
Yeah.
Original grant was granted in 2009.
Oh, God, yeah, I remember this one.
They're
Okay.
taking-
Yep, I remember.
They're taking full advantage of the 19
Yeah, yeah,
19 years that they're
So we would need either a motion to deny this or a motion to approve the extension to the date.
Correct, correct.
What's the extension to what date? What's the date?
July 22nd.
July 20.
Oh, no, that's
2030.
Tough without seeing the,
July 27th, 2020,
it's in the last paragraph.
27th, 2030.
July 22nd.
22nd.
Is what it says in Frank's, I think, right? In the last paragraph.
Event last, July 22nd, 2030.
I think when it talks about substantial changes, yeah, it could talk about maybe an expansion of wetlands or things like that. But for planning and zoning, it's also things like, did the plan of, did like the POCD, the plan of conservation development, did that change? Did the goals of the town change of how we want land in that lot or that area, you know, be developed? You know, did the zoning change, you know, as part of a big rechange? So for this, nothing major has, you know, changed at this point.
Do we have a motion from anybody then?
I'll do a motion to approve the extension to July 22nd, 2030.
Motion from Commissioner Sabia. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Stewart. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Was that an I at the end? Rick?
I raised my hand, sorry, I just, I'm,
Unanimous.
All right. We have minutes.
If anybody has objections, the minutes looked good from last meeting. I will start a motion to accept the minutes from last meeting. What was that, April 9th?
Yep. Would somebody like to
Motion
second that?
Second from Commissioner Zamory. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, public outreach I see is on here, and I see that we did receive a new.
Yeah, so for public outreach, everybody has a new one of these pamphlets. What we'd like you to do at this point is just take it home with you, make notes onto it, go through the content, look at content, look at the images, and if you have any comments, go right ahead and either write right on this or take a separate sheet and make notes. Then me and Commissioner Zamory will look and compare all of the notes together and see what is a collective thought.
Yeah, and just to explain some of the deltas from the last one you got, right, is the mission statement was put on the front page. Okay. We did have a clearer picture up top. Then on the complete back, thanks, Ben, for doing that QR code for it. So we have a nice QR code on there that takes us to the inland wetlands page. And also put a copyright and version at the bottom. Is James DeMail still online?
James, you still there?
I'm still here.
Hey, James, Mark Zamory.
Trooper, man.
Nice guy.
You're a trooper.
You had a really great suggestion when I saw you in person with Andrew as to where we could place an electronic copy of this. If you could remember that, send me the URL where that site is, that would be great. Because then I'll talk with Teresa just to kind of prepare for when we're ready to put the electronic version up on the site. I can't remember exactly where that was, but I remember it was a great idea.
Yeah, I believe it was under inland wetlands, and then there was, what was there? Yeah, it might have just been right under inland wetlands. Maybe another spot. Oh, useful resources. So it's
Yeah.
under planning and zoning and then useful resources. Because we already have links to vernal pools, bamboo,
Yeah.
things like that.
So the only thing we might change, sorry, Ben, let me take a look at the scan, then we'll ask everybody else. Maybe we'll go directly to that location. But for now, it goes directly to the main. Yeah. And then the other thing was Two other things, as you open up the pamphlet all the way over to the right, Andrew, right, we felt that'd be better to list less questions and answers to get a little more real estate, because we're going to have really a bunch of questions when we point them to the website. So just let them get all the questions and answers there. And then also we took the pictures of the marker plate detail and the post detail and really just expanded them all down the center section. So
I think that looks great.
Yeah, I really
that was
think
nice,
that's
right?
cool. I think
Yeah,
it's
it
a
was-
pretty good improvement.
Yeah.
1,000 times better.
You're saying you want to go less than 7 on the?
No, we're good with, if you guys are good with it, we're good with the way it is now.
Right.
Before there were like 11 questions or something crazy, right?
And we wouldn't be opposed if you think that there's a question that's more important than one that's on here. Make those notes on there. We want everybody's thoughts on it.
Absolutely.
We'll just compare everybody's thoughts. And if it's, something that's consistent with all of you, then
Honestly, I had the old one, but it disappeared. I have no idea what happened to it.
this one's one step further. So
I know, but I don't know what the other 11.
throw the other one away.
So I don't know what the 11 are. Oh.
They're draft copies, so they self-destruct after.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Commissioner Zam and Andrew, for that. Before we get that last motion, I just want to thank Andrew Brotman and Kathleen Gallagher and James DeMayo for all of your continued help in the process of these meetings. It's that much more apparent when you're sitting in the seat with the gavel. So thank you all for everything you do for us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
That on the record. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn from Commissioner Sabia, second from Commissioner Zamarie. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.